RuneScape is one of the longest-running, most successful MMORPGs of all time. You've probably played it. It probably taught you that bronze is made from tin and copper. It helped you spot online scams, and it changed how you look at party hats forever. Now, MMORPGs are massive games, and people keep telling me they get better roughly 100 hours in. So for the last 2 months, I've played RuneScape like it's my job, putting in just over 100 hours to explore all the skills, complete the quests, kill the bosses, and answer some of the strangest questions like, why can't you go back in dialogue boxes?
But first, I need to make something very clear. Not this RuneScape, this RuneScape. You see, RuneScape has an interesting history. It looked like this when it first released. Then it went through a few graphical changes over the years, and in 2004, it updated to RuneScape 2, which wasn't a different game, it was just a major graphical overhaul with some quality of life updates, and a new name. Then in 2012, the evolution of combat happened, which was a major mechanical overhaul affecting how combat worked, introducing abilities, cooldowns, skills, giving armor, hit point bonuses, massively changing how the game actually played. They changed the name to RuneScape 3 to reflect this, and broadly speaking, this entire update sucked.
People left in droves. It was seen as one of the most controversial changes in the history of the game, worse than the removal of the wilderness to prevent real-world trading, but the game limped on. 1 year later, two massive things would happen. The first is Jagex, the people who make RuneScape, realized their mistake with the evolution of combat and announced a new version of RuneScape, or more accurately, an old version. In 2013, Old School RuneScape released, which was a build of the game saved from a development screenshot taken in 2007, which is why the subreddit is known as 2007scape. And the second thing is RuneScape Live would be renamed to RuneScape 3 to coincide with the game upgrading to use HTML5. And then later in 2016, the NXT client upgrade, which brought even more graphical changes, pushing both Old School RuneScape and RuneScape 3 even further apart in terms of looks and mechanical gameplay.
This means there are now two versions of RuneScape, and you couldn't share a character across both. You could have the same account and same name and membership in one would count in the other, but they would be separate characters with different skill totals and banks and progression. Now, history has shown Old School RuneScape would become the more popular of the two games by a wide margin. It dominates in live player counts, Twitch viewership, and YouTube videos. Indeed, Old School RuneScape content makes it to the mainstream news with series like Swampletics, Tileman, or the Level 3 Firecape. But RuneScape 3 is still here, still receiving major updates, new continents, new quests, new skills, even entire new combat styles. So why did it lose the battle against an older version of itself? And does it have any redeeming qualities? What diamonds in the rough can we find in this 25-year-old game?
To find out, I'll be breaking down design decisions, training the skills, doing the quest, even delving into Daemonheim and doing some dungeoneering with the Jagex staff themselves. I'll be getting into the real fundamentals and then looking at the general overalls, ultimately spending 100 hours to see if RuneScape does indeed get better. And then I'll be explaining why this several hundred-year-old symbol of interconnected rings is the perfect visualization of RuneScape's systems. So whether you're an old fan, a brand new player, or just need a 3-hour-long background video while you're doing something else, then welcome. I'm Josh Strife-Hayes. Grab a cup of tea, settle in and join me on this journey of 100 hours in RuneScape 3. As usual, a massive thank you to all the supporters on Patreon and Twitch who keep the channel alive and allow me to spend this much time working on one video. More information on how you can support at the end. For now, let's begin. Now, this video is a bit disjointed. A usual review would be structured by breaking the various elements of the game down, quests, combat, skills, story, into individual sections and covering them each at once. And I'll be doing that to a degree, but mostly this video follows my actual journey of 100 hours of gameplay. And in most MMOs, this would still be a rather linear journey, as most MMOs have certain maps broken down into level ranges, bosses you naturally reach after certain playtimes. They may indeed be open games, but there's still a kind of main narrative that you follow. RuneScape doesn't have that. This is a double-edged sword as a player and a reviewer. The freedom to go anywhere and do anything is great, but it also makes structuring a review quite difficult. So think of this as one man's adventures through Gillinor, distractions and all.
RuneScape as a brand has gained major cultural and social significance. YouTubers, Twitch streamers, celebrities, you can see RuneScape references in so many things, like Kit Boga having a RuneScape membership show up in his fake bank accounts, or how 92 being half of 99 is now a meme. Even Gnome Child shows up outside the RuneScape bubble. But it's always old school RuneScape, the character models, the font, the items. Why hasn't RuneScape 3 had the same cultural impact? Stick this video on your second monitor, and let's find out.
Character creation. There are no classes in RuneScape, so you don't need multiple characters. You can train all the skills and equip all items provided you've got the skills to do so. You can max every skill at 99. Even people who never played RuneScape likely know the skill caps are 99, except not anymore. The skills now go to 120. Jagex realized they'd kind of painted themselves into a corner with years of power creep and items slowly approaching the mythical 99 stat requirement, so when they released the Dungeoneering skill back in 2010, they set the level cap of Dungeoneering at 120, and this proved popular for the hardcore players, so they increased the level cap on a few other skills over the years. Some skills have actual new improvements going all the way to 120. Other skills have a virtual cap of 120, and you are still celebrated if you reach it. Nothing in this character creator matters, by the way. You'll be equipping armor almost immediately, and you can change everything at the makeover mage later if you want to. Indeed, if you want to finish all the quests, you might need to. What does matter, though, is the choice of regular or Iron Man mode. RuneScape is an MMORPG, so you'd think the massively multiplayer would be a focus, but with more and more people wanting to play MMOs solo, RuneScape have full support for the Iron Man mode. While in this mode, you still share the world with other players, but you cannot trade with them, cannot use the Grand Exchange, which is the player-controlled marketplace, and cannot join regular players for boss kills. You're effectively being self-sufficient within a multiplayer world. So why would anyone do this? Well, first of all, prestige. It adds a little icon to your nameplate in chat so people know you're an Iron Man, by the way. And second, it forces you to engage with all of the content in the game. If you want a certain weapon and a specific boss drops it, you now need to go and kill the boss until it drops the weapon. You can't just grind for money and then go and buy it from someone else. I think Iron Man mode is one of the better ways to play the game once you are used to the game itself. There is also hardcore Iron Man who only have one life. When you die, there is a server-wide message letting everyone know how. For this playthrough, I won't be playing as an Iron Man, but I will still try to be as self-sufficient as possible. Servers in RuneScape are called worlds, and you can hop between them freely. Certain worlds are dedicated to certain minigames, so players know where to gather to do certain things, but as we'll see later, this doesn't actually work anymore. Rest in peace, pest control. We start on the classic tutorial island. A dotted yellow path guides us along. Click to move, spin the camera with the mouse. RuneScape works on a flat, square, tiled grid. Ranged attacks have tile ranges. Enemies are specific tiles big. There is no jumping and no mechanical height. Click to talk to NPCs. Chat boxes will appear with their head icons. Click doors to open them. There is a reason everyone calls this a medieval clicking simulator. But let's just rip this band-aid off right now, because this is probably my biggest personal issue, and many people may disagree, but hear me out. RuneScape 3 isn't medieval. Not anymore. And nowhere is this more apparent than the graphical styling of the user interface. Let's start with old school RuneScape so we have a foundation. It's earthy. The chat box has the color of an old scroll parchment. The buttons are brown bricks. The inventory section is held up by these stone column flourishes. And not every edge is perfectly straight. You've got the rough edges of the inventory tab corners, the recesses between the buttons at the bottom. Even if you use the RuneLite client to pop out the inventory asset, you've got the slightly bulging corner of the capstone, the crossed swords of the combat tab. The user interface itself has the feeling of a grounded adventurer's day-to-day sights, rough and ready. These small flourishes keep the overall aesthetic rooted in classic lower magic fantasy. And while there's a small level of customization available for the RuneLite client, overall, this is how old school RuneScape will look. If you watch a streamer or a YouTube video or see a screenshot, the old school UI stays instantly recognizable because of the color palette, fantasy flourishes, and asset positioning. The login screen for old school looks like this, flaming torches leading to an ominous doorway, a fantasy world. These flames are actually called the flames of login. We'll see where they are later. The RuneScape 3 user interface is none of these things, and is one of the biggest issues for players moving from old school to 3 or people trying to watch RuneScape 3 content. The medieval color palette of earthy browns is replaced with modern, closer to Magitech sci-fi blue. The background stone textures are all gone and replaced with this transparent grey. Rough edges have been replaced with straight lines. The columns are now gone. The tabs, such as inventory and equipped items, are no longer rough stones, but these clean trapezoids. Buttons are either squares, or in the case of the top right close X's, diamonds. The public text box has lost the scroll texture and is the same transparent blue-grey, and NPC chat dialog boxes have been updated. They do still have the scroll texture, but where old school advances chats by having the player click here to continue, RuneScape 3 has a dedicated button with clean, straight lines. The chat box font has also been updated from this more flourished medieval style to a clean, modern style with fewer, if any, embellishments or serifs, and the login screen now looks like this. But the biggest change is not with the aesthetic, but the customization the player can now do. Almost everything can be moved and resized. Tabs can be split off from each other or reformed. There's even an option to reskin with legacy colors, which makes everything a bit more brown and changes the public chat box scroll bar from the modern yellow thin bar to a blocky brown bar. The customization is extensive, and it does mean that over time you can set your game up to look how you want it to look, but it also means every content creator has a different, overwhelming looking screen because of the extreme amount of information that you need to be aware of while doing high-level RuneScape 3 content, and as a viewer this can be very difficult to deal with.
Tell me, at a glance, what's going on here? How about here? Or here, or even here? RuneScape 3 has increased in complexity over the years with more items, equipment, skills, combat tricks, but nowhere is this more visually apparent than the increase in the user interface complexity. It's lost the simple medieval feel and gained overwhelming modern variation. Now, this isn't inherently a bad thing. For many players, it offers a huge amount of customization, personalizing your experience. But that advantage is often overshadowed by how intimidating the game now looks to a new player. Old school RuneScape has a rough but simple, recognizable fantasy aesthetic. RuneScape 3 made itself look modern and lost the medieval soul along the way. We'll see this gets even worse when we look at the cosmetics, the cash shop, and the overly flashy particle effects later.
Returning to old-school RuneScape after an absence feels like coming home to a warm fire and a cozy blanket and a mug of tea. It's simple but homely, and the process of getting reacquainted isn't too demanding. Returning to RuneScape 3 feels like taking a back-to-work seminar. The feeling of familiarity is still there, but the vibe is different. It's about finding out what you've missed, being bombarded with new treasure hunter promos, and trying to work out why you set the UI up that way. The moment is less, I'm back, and more, what happened? So even though I do have a long-time character on RuneScape 3, old enough to have a flagstaff of festivities from the first RuneFest, I still found it easier to completely start again than try and work out what was going on. This is the first moment you feel that RuneScape 3 is a game searching for its own identity, trying to break away from its foundations while also clinging to them for guidance, not exactly sure of what it wants to be. The tutorial starts with you chopping down a tree. Now, old players will think you might need a hatchet, either equipped or in your inventory, but not anymore. Meet the tool belt. The tool belt is a utility added in 2011. It comes almost fully stocked with all the skilling items you'll need. Hatchet, fishing rods, farming tools, crafting molds. No longer do you need to carry any of these in your inventory, or go and find them within the world. You just start with them. This is a quality of life update which can actually remove some of the charm of travel or purpose of places. There's no point having a crafting mold shop if you just start with the molds, so to me the tool belt is a great example of the double-edged sword of RuneScape 3's design philosophy. Imagine gameplay time as a mix of actually doing the thing and preparing for the thing. In old school, preparation takes a while, be that gathering resources, organizing your inventory, using runes to teleport to places, but that preparation is part of the overall experience. Sometimes doing the thing has more weight if it needs to be prepared for. Getting your fishing rod from the bank is not fishing, but it is a part of the overall fishing experience. RuneScape 3, however, has tried to remove as much of the preparing for the thing time as possible and have the player in the zone of doing the thing more. So we'll see many updates which all focus around keeping the player in the moment of gameplay instead of the moments between gameplay, despite the fact that those moments between are important for building emotional context. Things like the lodestone network replacing teleportation spells, the mining ore boxes reducing banking runs, and the combat adrenaline system restoring health. You can even teleport to boss locations or minigames or quest start points through a menu. Back to the tutorial, we cut the tree down and get some logs, light them on fire. Don't worry, your tinderbox is also on your tool belt, and then we catch some shrimp from the nearby pond using the small net we also already have. Then we cook the shrimp. This small interaction is basically how the rest of the game works. The player interacts with stuff to get resources, manipulates those resources into things or parts of a further process, and then interacts more. Chop logs, light fire, catch fish, cook fish, eat fish. You will, however, fail when you try to cook the fish the first time, which is lovely because early game failure sets up the player to expect to to retry things. You can use the minimap to find icons of interactable stuff like trees, water sources, anvils, or more, but as we'll see soon, there is a pretty big bug with this. Now to the top left, you'll notice the activity tracker, currently on step 15 out of 53. RuneScape 3 has a very thorough in-game system to always give the player guidance on what to do. It's not mandatory, it's always a suggestion, but this is a great resource for newer players who don't do so well with go and do whatever you want type games, because open-ended direction can go from feeling free to feeling directionless pretty quickly, and people quit. The chef teaches us how to make bread, bucket on sink to get water, then use that with flour to make bread dough, use that with the oven. RuneScape is really just a game about combining things. Moving around the world, you'll notice we've been running, and up there is your run energy icon. When it runs out, right-click and choose sit, which recovers energy faster. You recover it so fast, in fact, there's basically no point ever using stamina potions, which is a great example of an item being made redundant by a quality of life update.
This trainer now tells us about quests, and this is the real core of RuneScape, the meat and potatoes. I have my fair share of issues with RuneScape 3, but quests, they redeem it. I think RuneScape is the gold standard for MMORPG quests. Yes, old school RuneScape has some decent ones, but RuneScape 3 has elevated what quests can be. From super serious and emotional to light-hearted and surreal, from laugh-out-loud funny to actually rather disturbing, RuneScape 3 is the reigning champion of MMO questing. And remember, the design philosophy is reduce the time between stuff, increase the time doing stuff. You can quest immediately. And it's good immediately. There are over 300 quests, and these aren't your usual collect 10 bear asses or find 10 sacks of wheat. These are fully fleshed out stories with twists and turns, competent voice acting in some cases, and sometimes permanent changes to the world. And my god, I'm going to be doing a lot of them over the next 100 hours.
You can organise the quest list by difficulty, release date, combat requirement, overall in-game timeline, or connected series. While RuneScape didn't used to have one central plot and was instead a fantasy world with a lot of things going on at once, RuneScape 3 has crept toward a single central narrative involving the gods returning to the land and the player becoming the world guardian. It's important to note you aren't the one chosen by fate. You are just a hero doing their best, helping people, saving villages, defeating evil. You weren't super special magic awesome, you were just damn good at your job and the gods noticed you. However, there is a problem with the World Guardian narrative being physically shown in the overworld, because the world will change even if you haven't actually done it. We'll see later how RuneScape exists in both the 5th and 6th age at the same time, and this creates a sort of narrative dissonance between what you think should be happening and what actually is happening.
Quest design in RuneScape has changed over the years, and you can often tell the era a quest was made. Think of early RuneScape as a big fantasy world created to be a functioning world, and then quests were added to that world after the fact. For example, they gave Draenor a big creepy manor because a vampire lived there. Then when they needed a creepy quest, they put it there. Then it's a Slayer monster location as well. It fits multiple purposes. Old quests were slotted into an already existing world. Indeed, many of them had you explore multiple locations multiple times. Recipe for Disaster being a homage to past areas. The Legends quest taking you from the jungle across the land you already knew. The Mayaki plotline having you explore the eastern vampiric lands. Old quests take place in the familiar overworld, and this enhances both things, the quests and the world. You get the familiar feel of, I know this land, with the novel feel of, but I don't know this story within it. Doing a quest and retreading old ground you'd explored before added a new layer of depth to that place.
Newer RuneScape quests, however, often have entire areas made just for that quest with no other reason to go to that area, or sometimes even way to access the area. Take the Shadows over Ashdale Lovecraftian horror adventure taking place in a town you never need to return to, or Violet is Blue taking place in the Snowlands accessed through a portal. They're good quests in lovely looking areas, but they feel like mini expansion modules accessed through RuneScape, not a part of RuneScape itself. This ties back to RuneScape 3 struggling to find its own identity. Old RuneScape was a functioning fantasy world first, and quests naturally fit into the world, while new RuneScape is about creating quests and then finding a way to move the player to the location they happen in. Quests from different eras and by different designers also highlight consistency issues. Take Buyers and Sellers, it's a thieves training quest. Sometimes you'll need to give an NPC an item, and that can be done by interacting with the NPC and they bring it up in dialogue, or right-clicking on the item in your inventory and using it on the NPC. Which one you'll need depends who programmed the quest. There's no consistent templating to quest design. Back to the tutorial. We do some mining, hit some rocks with a pickaxe, get some ore, melt it into bars, and then make the bars into stuff. The entire mining and smithing skill were reworked back in 2019, and they are now a whole mini-game style thing with rocks sparkling to give more ore, energy which is refilled by clicking and runs out and then you mine slower. Multiple people can now mine one rock as the ore is client-side instead of server-side, and then you deposit the ore into an ore bank, not the regular bank. It's a whole new system, but I do prefer it. It's made the entire skill a bit more engaging and rewards players actively paying attention, but can still be done AFK. We make the ore into a bronze dagger, equip it, and now let's talk about combat because my god, things have changed. Traditional MMOs have the tank, DPS, and healer holy trinity, sometimes with a support role. RuneScape does not have this. Everyone tanks, everyone does damage, and everyone is responsible for healing themselves. Indeed, you can't heal others to any worthwhile degree. So if you're in a group killing bosses, instead of fitting into a trinity, you instead focus on which type of damage you are bringing. You may remember RuneScape having the famous combat triangle, melee, mage, and range, like rock, paper, scissors. That's sort of still true, but it's also augmented because in 2023, RuneScape got a brand new combat style, the minion summoning, health sapping Necromancy skill, which made the combat triangle not into a square, but more of a pyramid with Necromancy at the top above everything else because it's just so damn good, but we'll get to that later. Let's start with the basics. You have 1,000 hit points, a few more than the 10 old school players may be used to, because your constitution skill gives you 100 hit points per level and you start at level 10. Certain armors also have hit points attached to them. Equip a weapon and you'll see 3 important stats: accuracy, damage, and combat style. Weapons have these built in, but your own skills, attack, range, and magic also affect them. Combat super style can be melee, mage, or range. These are then subdivided into stabbing, slashing, or crushing, arrows, bolts, or thrown weapons, and then the elemental spells, fire, earth, air, or water. Certain enemies can be weak or resistant to certain styles and sub-styles. So the dagger, the accuracy bonus is 150, the style is stab, the damage is 48, and the speed is 4 ticks. Everything in RuneScape works on the internal tick system. A tick is 0.6 seconds. If you click to move, interact, attack, or use an ability, the action does not happen instantly. Instead, it will be queued up and happen on the next available game tick. There are very few exceptions to this. Melee combat just needs the weapon, or weapons, because the evolution of combat brought with it offhand versions of weapons. Just be aware, in order to wield an offhand weapon, it must be the specific offhand version of that weapon. Range combat needs both the weapon and ammo, with both of them having an impact on total accuracy. And magic combat needs a magic weapon and some runes to cast spells. When fighting anything, you'll see an icon to the right of its nameplate. This is the combat super and substyle the enemy is weak against. But now combat gets deeper with the adrenaline system and the manual or revolution ability bar of that. Let's start with manual because it's easier to explain. Gaining levels in a combat style does not just unlock the ability to equip better gear, as it used to. It unlocks new abilities for that style. While in combat, you build up adrenaline, either by auto-attacking, which generates about 2% per hit, or using builder abilities, which generate 8%. You can see the adrenaline bar here. You then spend adrenaline on powerful abilities. Let's take the melee abilities for an example. Slice is a basic ability, requiring 0 attack, so you start with it, and generates 8% adrenaline. It hits for between 95 and 115% of equipped weapon damage, but if the target is stunned, that damage is increased by 40%. So we already have status effects, stun, and tactical timing. Also at level 1 we have Slaughter. This is a threshold ability, meaning you need at least 50% adrenaline to activate it, and doing so drains 15% of the adrenaline bar. This inflicts a bleed effect on the enemy, doing around 35% of weapon damage every 2 ticks for a total of 5 hits. If the target moves while bleeding, they take 3 times as much. The final type of ability is called an ultimate. These need 100% of the adrenaline bar and drain all of it for massive damage. A good example is the level 81 attack skill Meteor Strike, which also needs a 2-handed weapon to be equipped. This hits for around 300% damage, but it's also an area of effect, so it can hit multiple things. If you leave combat with adrenaline left over, it will be consumed to restore your health, meaning getting into combat can sometimes be the best way to heal. The adrenaline system isn't just melee skills, it works for range, mage, and necromancy, like the level 15 ranged threshold skill Rout, which knocks the target back by 1 tile and binds them to the spot for 6 ticks, or the level 2 mage ultimate Omnipower, which smacks the enemy for 300% spell damage with all 4 elements.
Now, the issue with abilities in regards to range and mage combat is abilities don't need ammunition to work. So a ranger will have to have arrows equipped, and they will use arrows for the few auto attacks they do, but they won't use them for abilities. Likewise, a mage will use runes for auto casting whatever basic spell they have selected, but their abilities, like Dragon Breath, don't need runes. They're essentially free. And seeing as abilities are your main source of combat damage, this means rangers and mages don't use resources up as fast as they used to. This can lead to a bit of a graphical disconnect. In old school RuneScape, when you see a ranger fire an arrow, they've fired an arrow. When a mage casts a spell, they've used runes to do it, but in RuneScape 3 that's not always true. A ranger may visually shoot many arrows, but they're abilities, so they don't actually use the arrow item. And a mage may cast many spells, but they're abilities, so they don't need runes. This can be really jarring to a player used to a one-to-one visual connection to ammo usage. And this is not the first time we'll see a visual disconnect between animations and mechanics.
Some abilities need certain combination of weapons or shields equipped, so weapon choice isn't just about the weapon's total damage, it's also about which abilities it allows you to use. But there's one more major combat change. What if you just don't want to bother pressing all of those pesky buttons quickly, remembering the builders, the thresholds, the ultimates, what stacks with what? It's a lot. So what if you want to just click and wait, like RuneScape used to be, but you also want the abilities to still happen? Well, with the Revolution combat system, you can do exactly that, and you don't need to remember anything. You drag the ability to the hotbar, line them all up, then get into combat, and let Revolution take over. It works like this. The game looks at the ability on the far left of your hotbar and uses it. If it can't use it because it's on cooldown or you've not got the adrenaline required, it moves on to the next ability and tries to use that one. It does this all the way along. So stick your ultimates on the left, some thresholds in the middle and the builders on the right, and then just click and the game cycles your abilities for you, and combat looks visually impressive with very little input. The skill here is setting up your bar before combat happens. And you can still manually activate abilities on the bar using buttons, that's fine. There are of course issues with this, such as how it's introduced badly and becomes a crutch new players rely on and never actually learn how abilities work in isolation, but now we know how combat broadly works. Back to the tutorial. We learn about banks and then prayers. Prayers are temporary buffs which drain your prayer points when activated, and you refill those by praying at an altar. The magic tutor tells us about runes, but we don't actually cast any spells, and then we're told to use our home teleport spell to travel to the mainland. And classic players might be thinking, finally, off to Lumbridge, but no, that was changed. You now start in Burthorpe. You teleport in via the lodestone network. This is a feature added in 2012. Every major city has a lodestone outside it. Once you have activated the lodestone by reaching it once, you can then freely teleport to it whenever with no cooldown. Remember the philosophy of less between gameplay moments, more gameplay moments? You don't need to level up your mage skill to be able to teleport anymore. Those spells are still in the game and they do have some fringe use cases, such as being cast instantly and while in combat, but in general the lodestone network has made teleportation relatively trivial. Quick geographical comparison between the new Burthorpe starting location and the old Lumbridge one. Lumbridge Castle has a few quests which start within it, a swamp to the south, forest and wizard tower to the west, desert to the east, and the route to Varrock and Falador to the north. You can travel in any direction from Lumbridge, and it will take a while before you bump into a members-only area. It's a great free player starting place precisely because it doesn't push membership on you early on, and Lumbridge was named after Cambridge, where the game was originally made, so there's some real-world heart added to it. Burthorpe, however, is the very edge of the free player world, and going west is the members' barrier to Catherby instantly. And this matters because, as we'll soon see, the free world has bugs that the members' worlds do not. So now we are here. What do? Well, we do the tutorial. Again. Literally, we talk to this guy called Turiel. Talk tutorial. RuneScape is a game about puns, and I appreciate this. Turiel is a Slayer master. He explains the Adventure Path guide and the hero menu. The Adventure Path suggests things to do. I'll follow it and trust it until the natural urge to explore takes over. Turiel asks if we want combat, riches, or adventure. Whichever you choose, you can do the others later, so we'll start with adventure. This means killing trolls, but for that we need food, so we're sent to cut down some trees, start some fires, and cook some fish. And you might think, we've just done this, and yes. RuneScape has gone through a few tutorial openings in its life. Tutorial Island, the Adventure Paths, Ashdale was a starting area for a while. There was a brief period where the quest New Foundations had you killing a dragon in a basement. And unfortunately, they've tried to remix and remaster all of the game's openings so many times, they've ended up kind of merging them all together and overlapping them, so there is a lot of repeated steps in the first few hours. You will also see a wiki button attached to the chat box. RuneScape is very much a wiki game. I'd feel confident in saying RuneScape probably has the most comprehensive wiki of any MMORPG. It's insanely detailed, and you'll be using it a lot. Notice we've leveled up a skill. You can tell because the icon is flashing in the skills list. Click this to see what you've unlocked at that new level. Now, one thing I love about RuneScape, and this is one of the strongest design elements of the game, is that it does not begin at endgame. There are relevant, challenging, interesting, and engaging things to do in RuneScape at every level from the very start to the very end. Yes, the higher level content of course needs you to be higher level and have better gear, but getting those levels and collecting that gear is sometimes as interesting as the content you're working towards. There's no denying RuneScape 3 is a grindy game, but there is always something different to grind. Either a new quest, a minigame, a boss, a slayer task, a training area. There's an almost unmatched amount of variety, and most of it remains relevant for years. In fact, the investment of gameplay time into RuneScape being so stable is one of the reasons people return to it even after year-long breaks. Now, I'm not saying all of it remains relevant. As we'll see, there's no shortage of dead content. This game came out in 2001, so there's bound to be some forgotten stuff, but on average, RuneScape 3 is fun all the way through. Even with the small amount of fishing required by the tutorial, we've gained quite a few levels, and this is a major change. In RuneScape 3, you gain experience much faster. So much faster, in fact, that 99 capes don't hold the prestige they once did. But fast experience brings with it the paradox of efficiency that we'll see soon, because RuneScape 3 is an efficiency nightmare. Chat to the armor-making tutor and you'll notice that he is voiced.
Berthorpe needs weapons, and we miners provide the ore used to make them. You want to help out?
Historically, RuneScape was never voiced. Old school still isn't, but back in 2011, they released the quest One Piercing Note, which we'll do later. The quest was fully voiced, even had a song or two, and it was really good. Since then, they've used voice acting somewhat sparingly, adding it to new quests, retroactively adding bits to major old quests. The signature heroes, which we'll see later, can be a bit annoying, veering into that edgy, sarcastic, aloof humour of the mid-2000s, but in general, what voice acting there is solid. Unfortunately, voice acting never became a mainstay for the game, as it was simply too time-consuming and didn't add enough to be viable for everything. Plus, the lines must be recorded months in advance, leaving no room for last-minute changes. Mine some tin and copper, smelt it into bars, and the game says, go and fight the trolls, or stay and make more armor. Your choice. And this is RuneScape distilled. Show the player how to do something, and then ask, do you want to do it 1,000 more times? And the kind of player RuneScape wants will say yes. Here's a small but lovely audio touch. You can hear the difference between smithing hot, malleable metal, which gives fast experience, and cold metal, which is slower. Hot sounds like this, while cold sounds like this. So there's an audio indicator to put the metal back in the furnace. That's a lovely touch. You'll notice while I'm making armor, the tooltip says this is not just melee armor, but also tank armor of a certain tier. Tiers are a general level requirement of items, so tier 10, 20, 30 requires level 10, 20, and 30. This system breaks down a bit when you get involved in Dungeoneering, because they've used the word tier to describe two different systems, but that's coming up later. The important bit is the specific type. In this case, tank. Within all four combat styles, melee, mage, range, and necromancy, armor is broken down into 5 subtypes: tank, power, hybrid, and then very rare cases called hybrid power, and a few called all. Equipping melee tank armor will provide decent defense against melee, good defense against range, but not as much against mage, and can even reduce your accuracy bonus with other styles. So while you can equip anything you want and use any weapon, you probably shouldn't. Tank armor offers the highest defense and has life points attached to it. Also, it has player versus monster percentage damage reduction built into it. Power armor gives defense equal to tank armor 5 tiers below, but also gives a damage boost, so it's useful for combat training or burst damage. This also tends to be more expensive. Hybrid armor has less defense than tank, but also defends equally well against all styles and has no negative to using any style. So if you're planning on swapping between melee weapons and ranged weapons and don't want to swap armor sets, hybrid armor is a good choice. You don't get access to power armor for any style for quite a while, so for now, we'll be using tank. Make a full set of bronze armor, dual wield some warhammers, cook some fish, we are ready for combat. So we head into a local troll cave, and this is where the game introduces you to adrenaline, and this is my biggest gripe with how the adrenaline is introduced. Because this small thing, I think, is one of the biggest reasons the game sets new players up to not actually understand abilities. We are tasked with killing some trolls. This is pretty easy, just click. Then we get told about abilities. So far so good. Then we're sent to fight a boss troll called Morningstar. The revolution system is introduced, and we are instantly given a hotbar setup with 5 abilities already on it, none of which are explained to us, and we're told to just click the boss. So we do, the abilities fire off automatically, and we win. But how? This is for me one of the worst moments of the tutorial. Up until now, you've been explaining what something does, letting the player do it, and then moving on. But this is just giving the player a melee rotation and telling them, trust me bro, it works. There are abilities on this rotation which stun, some which inflict bleed, and some which do more damage if the target is stunned, or if they are bleeding, and you can then make them walk. There's a lot of depth here. But not only are the abilities not placed in the correct order to take advantage of this whole system is glossed over. I'm doing 5 abilities but not truly understanding what each is doing or how they are helping each other. I think the reason most players just default to using the revolution system is because in this moment right here, the game teaches you don't actually need to know what they do as long as they're all doing something. This is the moment combat gets reduced to let the game do it. It's why RuneScape 3 has a lot of players who are very good at combat, but can't explain why they're very good at combat. Beyond the auto ability usage, this cave is really nicely designed. The melee trolls, range trolls, and mage trolls, and you are sent to kill the style you're currently strong against. And that style drops a cape which supports your current style. And we'll see soon, they're all color-coded. Back tutorial. He gives us a Slayer log which lists all the monsters in RuneScape and any unique drops from them. If you're ever stuck for what to do, open this thing, go and find something you don't have. Slayer is actually a skill. You get a task from a Slayer Master. The task is always go and kill X amount of a certain enemy. So while most MMOs have go and kill X quests, RuneScape has that system as a skill. Archery starts the same way as anything in RuneScape. Go and gather the raw materials, in this case chopping trees for logs, fletching them into arrow shafts, and then killing a bunch of chickens for feathers, combining them into headless arrows, then mine and smith to create some arrowheads, and we're starting to see how all the skills are connected. Once we have arrows, we need to make a bow. That means more wood cutting, and then picking some flax and spinning that using crafting. So already within the tutorial alone, we've used woodcutting, fire making, fishing, cooking, fletching, mining, smithing, crafting, and multiple combat styles in one area. That is some densely packed design. When you equip the bow, you'll notice that your revolution bar changes automatically to your ranged setup. We didn't choose this, it just happens, and those 5 abilities, you never need to learn them. You get told to attack a cow, you do that, and they just start happening. The biggest advantage of ranged combat is you can attack stuff from behind cover, so most ranged abilities are about rooting enemies and keeping stuff away from you. A few of the abilities require charging before they fire off, and a few are channeled abilities which happen over a short time, but can be interrupted if you move or are attacked.
Old school players will be used to gaining experience in combat per point of damage done to an enemy. Not here. You gain experience per enemy killed, and you can go into the combat settings menu and decide where you want the experience to go from a kill when using a specific style. You can add it to range, defense, attack, strength, or hit points, any of the above, or none of them. You can even choose to block all incoming experience gained from PvP kills, so once you've got your perfect player killing build, you'll never level up anymore. But player versus player in RuneScape 3 is definitely something we'll look at later.
Kill some trolls with range, and now we're on to magic. Talk to apprentice Clara to get some free runes, and remember how combat spells in RuneScape always needed an elemental rune and a power rune like Mind, Chaos, Death, or Blood? Well, that's not the case anymore. You just need the normal runes. Mage armor, shear some sheep for some wool, spin that into balls of wool, and weave those into cloth, and then use that to make the actual armor. Equipping a mage wand again changes our abilities to the mage abilities, and now we need a spell set to auto-cast, in this case, Airstrike. Remember, you'll only cast that when you aren't using an ability, and will essentially always be using abilities. Tutorial now sets us a Slayer task. Kill some gelatinous abominations. You can find them in a nearby cave, but most Slayer enemies have a gimmick, a thing you'll need to actually kill them. For abominations, you need to wear spiked gauntlets to safely rip their hearts out once they are dead. That's pretty brutal. While on any Slayer task, you'll have a kill remaining count shown up here. You used to need the Slayer gem to get this, but nope, it's a permanent UI element now. Down in the Slayer cave, we meet Ariane, one of the signature heroes. So who on earth are they?
Back in 2010, Jagex released a blog called Who Are the Signature Heroes? The idea was simple. RuneScape had several quests where an NPC joins you for a bit and then leaves, and these quests and NPCs proved popular, but they were few and far between. Plus, RuneScape didn't really have any iconic, recognizable characters, NPCs or bosses, heroes or villains. It had well-known items like party hats and weapon designs like the Dragon Scimitar, which you could download as a cursor if you wanted to give your PC all of the viruses, but no characters. You had the three major gods, good guy Saradomin, evil guy Zamorak, and balanced guy Guthix, but they were more concepts, not actual characters. You have the deeper gods like Zaros or the Desert Pantheon, but regular players didn't know about those until they reached a high-level quest. So RuneScape was mostly just a fantasy world with some adventure in it. And honestly, at the time, players were kind of fine with that. RuneScape wasn't about epic, reality-destroying conflicts between ancient elder gods or larger-than-life plot-armored heroes. It was a lower-stakes kind of game. But that's hard to market. Advertisers like conflict, personality, characters. The Lich King leading a Draco-Lich against the last bastion of humanity grabs far more attention than a Christmas cracker and the concept of balance.
So the 7 signature heroes were designed to be the faces of RuneScape, and in 2012 they appeared on loading screens and featured in the first RuneScape cinematic trailer. Storylines would be written for them, they'd interact with the players in cutscenes and gameplay. They'd be woven seamlessly into the very essence of RuneScape over the next few years. You had Ariane, the powerful but naive mage, Ozan, the charming but arrogant thief, Sir Owen, the world's biggest Saradomin simp, Xenia, a retired adventurer who founded the Legends Guild, Linza, a blacksmith seeking to create the perfect sword, the mysterious Raptor, an absolute melee tank who only appears to fight massive things and then leave, and the 7th hero, you, the player.
Now, I'm sure all of this sounded great in a boardroom. There's just one problem. Players didn't care. And why should they? You can't just force 6 new NPCs into a game and tell the player base they're actually incredibly important to the lore and the land, and they've always been here, and you are no longer writing your own story through your own actions. You are instead a small part of their story. The signature heroes were a marketing push. However, after several years, they were never involved in enough quests to really matter. And eventually, Jagex just kind of gave up on them. And starting a new system, then just kind of giving up, is a thing we'll see happen a few times in RuneScape 3.
The most popular signature hero by far was the Raptor, the mysterious warrior, who would occasionally show up while you were doing combat stuff, praise or berate you based on how well you were doing, and then just kind of leave. The mysterious nature of the Raptor was the most intriguing thing about them, and amazingly, had Jagex not expanded on the Raptor's backstory and just left them as this unknowable warrior who talks to the player as a friendly rival, they might have actually become a decent face of RuneScape. But they did expand on the Raptor and removed all mystery, which was a shame. I'm not saying the Raptor has a bad backstory, I'm saying in a game where everyone has a story, having a mysterious warrior stay mysterious would have been nice. So the signature heroes will show up in a few quests and then just kind of slowly fade away. Don't expect too much from them. Ariane joins us, we kill some abominations, and the heart-ripping animation is pretty brutal. You'll notice they're also dropping items, and all of those items have values attached. How this onion is worth 1,230 gold, which seems like a lot, so let's talk about inflation and bonds. An onion in old school RuneScape has an inherent value of 3 coins. They are currently selling on the Grand Exchange for around 100 coins because people pay a convenience fee to get things quickly. An onion in RuneScape 3 has a value of 12 coins and is selling for 1,230, as we can see. But why? Well, RuneScape 3 has a lot of boss monsters which drop gold, a lot of gold, or items which have substantial high alchemy values, which is the in-game spell for converting items directly to coins. Over the years, the injection of coins into the economy reduced the buying power of each individual coin. And if you want a direct comparison to old school, let's check this out. Both old school RuneScape and RuneScape 3 have a monthly membership option. You can pay real money, but you can also buy a bond. A bond is an in-game item which you can either destroy to redeem membership on a single character or sell to another player, and then they can do that. This means you can buy a bond for real money, sell that to a player for in-game gold, the implication being RuneScape is now a pay-to-win game. That's something we'll cover later, but for now let's look at the prices. A bond in either game costs $8 or €7 as of this video. You can sell a bond in old school RuneScape for around 13.5 million coins. In RuneScape 3, however, one bond will get you 145 million coins, over 10 times as many. That price will probably date this video quite substantially as prices continue to rise. Now, this doesn't mean every valuable item from old school RuneScape is 10 times more expensive in RuneScape 3. Some items have lost almost all their value. You may be familiar with the Abyssal Whip, a powerful melee melee weapon. In old school RuneScape, they are still around 1 million coins because they're still good weapons. Power creep in RuneScape 3, however, has rendered the whip obsolete, and a whip will cost you 85k. So a whip in RuneScape 3 is worth 71 onions. So you have an economy with masses of gold, the top tier stuff costing billions, the bottom tier being all but worthless, and everything in between suffering from inflation. You would only need 7 bonds, a real world value of $56, to become a RuneScape 3 billionaire. Ariane gives us some mind runes and tells us to cast Confuse, so I click the spell in the spellbook and then on the enemy. With this, we've finished the Berthorpe tutorial and more suggested adventure paths open up. We can go to Lumbridge or learn to leathercraft or do some animal hunting or make potions with herblore, even travel to the endless underground dungeon of Daemonheim and do some dungeoneering. But to be thorough, I want to finish everything here first. Leathercrafting. Kill cows, collect the hide, go and tan it. I appreciate the fact the NPC who does this is called Tanya Hyde. Full set of ranger armor done, now a full set of wizard robes, then kill the tutorial trolls for more capes, and you'll notice the color coding. Melee is red, range is green, magic is blue. Visual differences in styles. Lovely choice. But there's still some more to do here. Quick shop tutorial about trading. Some shops even have free things you can take a few of. And before we leave, we hop on the agility course. Agility is a skill which lets you navigate shortcuts and helps you avoid traps in quests. You train it by running endless circuits of assault courses. It is one of the few skills that I'm incredibly thankful for the increased experience rates in. There is also hunter training. Hunting is all about setting our own traps and catching wild animals, then processing them into resources. Like how we can set this bird snare up and then wait for a bird to land on it and capture it. There's also farming. Rake some weeds from the patch, put the weeds in the compost bin for later, then plant some seeds like our potatoes here. Into this little patch of soil they go, we water it, and then just wait. While waiting, we can learn about herb lore. The druids explain we can add herbs to vials of water and then mix in other reagents to make different potions, like how this guam herb mixes with some Eye of Newt to make an attack potion, temporarily boosting our melee accuracy. You can grow herbs with the farming skill and find many other reagents with hunting. Then there's summoning. Buy a pouch, fill it with summoning shards, then stick one of 5 coloured charms into it: gold, green, crimson, blue, or elder. Finally, a specific reagent like a wolf's bone or steel bars, and you'll make a magical pouch which can summon a temporary familiar, like this spirit wolf here. While waiting for our potatoes to grow, we can go and see the spirit wolf in action back at the troll caves, and oh hey look, it's Ozan, one of these signature heroes. You can right-click and examine him, and it says, "The brave and magnificent Ozan who writes his own descriptions." And this is funny, but it's also a very important design flag. RuneScape is extremely self-aware, and a lot of the humour breaks the fourth wall, from NPCs with joke names, like how all the Falador Knights have Sir something, like Circumference, Ceramic Vase, Survivin'. There's even a squire who complains he won't become a knight because his last name is Vix. The jokes continue if you attempt to use a herring on a tree. It says this is not the mightiest tree in the forest, a reference to Monty Python. Sometimes characters refer to their own levels in conversation, but my favourite type of humour is when the game subtly calls you out for using a guide. Sometimes you need to be carrying a very specific combination of items to progress in a quest, a combination you would only know if you were using a guide. So if you happen to talk to the quest NPCs for the first time and you've already got those items on you, the quest will call you out for doing so. There are even 2 eternally warring states called Nate is not and Yart is so. Literally, no it isn't versus yes it is. Lumbridge itself is based on the city of Cambridge, so self-aware tongue-in-cheek humour is baked into RuneScape's identity. It started raining in the game, and the weather effects are lovely, but if you want a bit more control, visually, right-click the world map icon and choose skyboxes and then filters. And now you can just choose how the game looks: day, night, horror, calm, space, cave, anything. The in-game shadows will even change to match the light source you pick. You can add graphical filters like poisoned, drunk, Halloween, or play in cell-shaded mode, grayscale. You can invert the RGB values if you like. The level of player control over the UI and the visuals is really impressive. Potatoes have grown, so I harvest them and cook them. The adventure path now suggests I go to Lumbridge, but I have one thing to do before I leave, and that is dungeoneering. Back in 2010, Jagex released the Dungeoneering skill, taking place in the mountain of Daemonheim. This is an endless dungeon diving skill. You get given a ring of kinship, which is a free teleport to here whenever you want. You unequip all your items, and in you go. You can't bring anything into Daemonheim from the outside world, and each floor is a randomly generated series of orthogonally connected rooms. The doors connecting them are locked with skill checks, combat checks, or keys you can find in other rooms. Open all the rooms, kill the boss, get some experience, dive deeper. But if you can't bring anything into Daemonheim, where does all the stuff come from?
Well, you can find everything you need entirely within Daemonheim itself. There are unique trees, rocks, runes, resources, so you have to either be independent or run floors with a friend and have them make you something and trade it to you. Either way, someone needs the skills. If you want a bow down here, chop a tree and fletch it. If you want a sword, mine some ore and smith one. Then bind it to yourself and start with it on the next floor. Dungeoneering is essentially a self-sufficient challenge you can take on at any level and use all your skills to succeed in. I really like Dungeoneering. There's just one small problem. Jagex don't.
Dungeoneering, for all its brilliance, is close to forgotten content. Now, Daemonheim did get a major graphical rework while I was making this video, but that was for the archaeology skill, not the Dungeoneering skills specifically. So where's the evidence for it being forgotten? Well, the tooltips are wrong, referring to tiers as 1 instead of 10, but that's a small graphical issue, not a major mechanical oversight. How about Necromancy, the massive update, the entire new combat style, with an entire storyline connected to it, doesn't work in Daemonheim at all. Dungeoneering was an experience designed to bring together all the skills, and it just doesn't have one entire combat style available. When I went to Jagex to beta test Necromancy, the first question I asked was, does this work in Daemonheim? There was a long pause in the room before a quiet no. So I finish a Dungeoneering floor. The boss has a cool effect where they protect against a specific combat style at a time, forcing you to switch between styles, and I will come back here later with some other people to show you what a 5-man dungeon looks like, and also learn from Jagex how remarkably fragile Dungeoneering is to actually code and how a small change can break everything.
So I've been given a lot of early game direction, training, and options. The adventure path now suggests some bosses, which are very overleveled right now. Some area tasks can reward unique armor pieces, and the challenge tab with daily skilling rewards can give us some experience. We can even talk tutorial again and get a new Slayer task. Kill cows. RuneScape, for all its flaws, gives new players a ton of plot hooks, mechanical ideas, or just general hints on what they could do. You sometimes find when you give someone complete freedom, they fail to decide on anything, but give someone constraints or hints, and they'll come up with something. It's like how saying to someone, think of anything, is too broad. You'll draw a blank most of the times, but think of a funny film limits the options but increases the chances they'll choose something. When game designers say do whatever you want, new players can be overwhelmed. They'll blank and then do nothing. RuneScape solves that by saying do whatever you want, but here are a load of suggestions.
Reach level 5 in range and suddenly a few new abilities get automatically added to my hotbar. I'm just going to kind of hope they're arranged correctly. The game design has done a stellar job of guiding me so far, but I do wonder what the wiki says. So I check out the new player guide and the wiki says do quests. So I open my world map and look for the quest start icons, and here's one of the first major bugs. Quest icons do not show up on the map on free worlds only. On members' worlds, they work fine, but the free player map is broken. Thank you, Jagex. So let's talk quests, because they are most often goddamn brilliant. Quests in RuneScape are ordered into several storylines, and while some series do cross over, most don't. The start of any quest series can be a simple request which snowballs into an epic battle many hours later. Some series are short, like the Delrith the Demon questline having the quests Demon Slayer and then Shadows of the Storm. Some are epic, like the Elvish questline featuring 9 quests with the finale being Plague's End, a Grandmaster quest, hours long with many high skill requirements. The quest screen in-game explains where all the quests start, and if you click the spoiler, you can see what you'll need and what you'll receive for doing it. I think Jagex knew people were going to use the wiki anyway, so they just put all of that information in the game. You can also see what combat encounters you'll face, so you'll know roughly what to bring. While on a quest, the general area you need to be in will be highlighted in blue on your minimap and the world map. This helps keep you on track while not telling you exactly what to do. There's nothing more frustrating than being on a quest having no clue about where you need to go, but knowing you're in the right area will at least keep you looking for an answer. The quest The Blood Pact says talk to Xenia in the Lumbridge graveyard, so we load Stone Telly over and go and chat to her. You'll notice a little symbol by her nameplate. That's a quest series symbol. Other NPCs with that symbol are also on this quest. She says some Zamarakian cultists have kidnapped some local kids, and a cutscene shows the 3 cultists have made some sort of blood pact down below. So we fight down to stop this whole evil thing. And would you believe it, this quest is another tutorial, this time for the combat triangle. We're told this cultist uses a ranged weapon, so we should use melee, and killing them gets us their bow. And then we use the bow to shoot over the gap, reinforcing the ranged advantage of the bow, and then grab the magical staff and then use the staff to kill the final cultist. Well, that's the theory of what you're meant to do. In reality, just use one weapon for everything, but the design is solid. The final cultist drops his dual swords, and a quest complete screen gets us some quest points and some experience. We also earn some treasure hunter keys, but don't you worry, we'll get to the cash shop pretty soon. Finishing this quest also gives access to the deeper catacombs, so let's go back there. Down here we find a linear corridor of enemies increasing in difficulty. They each drop pieces of the Mask of Dragith Nirn. There are 5 pieces, with the last being dropped by the boss himself. And collecting all the pieces gives you the mask. There are even little statuettes you can steal from and sell to Xenia outside. And I love this. It's a little combat quest with silly characters, which rewards a new area with a linear challenge and a mini-boss. What great self-contained design. Down here we do see one thing RuneScape is known for. Terrible AI. This skeleton enemy isn't programmed to step out of the little area, but we can still shoot into it. So it's aggressive towards us, and we'll just kind of stand there. This is called safe spotting, and we'll use similar techniques to take down bosses later. Reach level 10 defense, then level 10 range, and now I can use an oak shortbow, which would help me kill these enemies faster, so I go and make one. And this is where the trap and the addiction of RuneScape's true gameplay loop begins. Everything stacks together, and this leads us to the paradox of efficiency. I could just go and buy everything I need from the Grand Exchange, but let's follow the process to actually supply the player economy. An oak shortbow needs a fletching level of 20 to go and make, so it's time to train fletching. I start woodcutting to get logs and fletch them into arrow shafts.
But while doing this, I reach level 10 woodcutting, and this means I can now use an iron hatchet, so it'll be efficient to go and get one of those. This means I need to mine some iron ore, but this needs level 10 mining, so I go and mine copper and tin until I hit level 10 mining, but even with the iron ore, I still can't smith it, so I train smithing using the copper and tin I've just got. But then I realise at 10 mining I can use an iron pickaxe, which would make mining quicker, so I spend some time making that to gather the iron ore faster to make the iron hatchet. But then I need feathers, so it's back to killing chickens, but I remember you can get feathers from hunting birds faster, so it's back to setting up snares. I collect a ton of feathers, then grab some flax from the fields to be spun into a bowstring. Now the oak bow will need an oak log, and that needs oak trees, and they need 15 woodcutting, so I go and get chopping every tree I can. I hit level 16 range entirely through killing chickens just to gather the feathers needed to make the arrows, and eventually I hit 20 fletching and make the oak bow. This means to make a simple weapon upgrade, I've trained woodcutting, fletching, mining, smithing, crafting, and combat, all for a bow, and this is great, but notice how I've said to myself, oh, I'm 10 mining. I should make an iron pick for efficiency. That phrase, for efficiency, will eat you alive in RuneScape 3.
Old school RuneScape has a few boosts to skill experience rates. Maybe before you start fishing, you'll consider getting the fisherman's equipment. Maybe woodcutting would get you the lumberjack outfit. There are a few hours of grind for many, many hours of benefit. Old school has a decent but not overwhelming amount of potential in-game boosts. But RuneScape 3, oh boy. If you want to play RuneScape 3 efficiently, don't. You will spiral into madness. Let's just use an example. Fire making. Set logs on fire. That's basically the skill. You train it by setting logs on fire using a tinderbox. The classic way of training is setting long lines of logs on fire. This is why you see long lines of fires by banks in old school RuneScape. But let's say you want to train fire making in RuneScape 3 and you want to be efficient. Now, not all of these will stack together, but most of them do. So figuring out what does and doesn't stack is another part of the puzzle. To be efficient, the wiki would recommend the following. 1. Get yourself a portable brazier, either from the Real Money Treasure Hunter lockbox shop or buying one from other players. Burning a log in this gives plus 14% experience, compared to just burning it on the ground. 2. Get yourself the Fired Up set. That's the Ring of Fire and Flame Gloves from the All Fired Up minigame. It'll take a few hours. 3. At level 46 summoning, make yourself a Pyre Lord familiar, or at higher levels use a Forge, Regent, Lava Titan, or Reborn Phoenix. All of these provide a bonus experience per log burnt, or an invisible fire-making level boost which reduces the time taken to light. 4. Strike a gnomish firelighter to automatically collect fire spirits as you go. These are things which appear and last for a minute. Grabbing them increases your experience. 5. The Brooch of the Gods is a pocket slot item which increases the chance of saving logs and getting better fire spirits while using a brazier. Stacks with the firelighters. Just be aware this costs 148 million coins. 6. If you are cutting logs from trees, complete the Grandmaster Light Within quest to unlock the Seren prayers and use the Superheat form which will automatically burn any logs that you cut from a tree. 7. Stack this with the passive buff Olwat's Adays from level 83 Archaeology to gain more experience from auto-burned chopped logs. 8. If you do have 99 Smithing and 102 Archaeology, you can equip the item Irithen Furnace Core, which can trigger an effect to increase fire-making experience by 5% for 5 minutes. 9. If you're level 22 Invention, which is an elite skill requiring other skills to be much higher, you can augment your tinderbox, and that is just the fire-making specific boosts. How about the generic boosts you can apply to any skill? Join a clan, get the clan avatar for a plus 6% boost for for skilling while in a clan citadel. Light a Torstol incense stick for another 2% experience boost. Use the Wise perk from Invention for another 4% boost. Equip a Wisdom aura bought with loyalty points earned from being a member for a long time to get a 2.5% experience boost for 90 minutes, or the Desert Pantheon aura for 10% for 1 hour. Use an Inspire relic power from Archaeology for another 2% boost. Equip an Advanced Pulse core for a 50% experience boost until the core explodes. Make sure to wield the Scepter of Enchantment if you were lucky enough to get one during the 2016 Treasure Hunter event or the re-release in 2022 for another 4% experience boost. And if you didn't get one, make sure you spend loads of money during the next chance to get one. Then flip the Coin of Enchantment item for another 2% boost. Activate the Rock of Resilience, an item in the Mental Health Awareness Week Real Money gift shop for another 4% boost. And don't forget to use your Premier artifact from the Premier Members Club for a 10% boost for 1 hour. And that's just firemaking. Other skills have more.
So what's the paradox? Well, it's simply the fact that gathering all these boosts would take so much time you could have gained enough experience in the skill to unlock faster training methods by just doing it, negating the need for the boosts. RuneScape 3 isn't a game designed to be played at max efficiency, at least not by a human. It's a game with so many possible efficiency boosts, you'll likely always have something available, and you then need the mental strength to say no. This is enough. You need to not chase meta gameplay methods here, because it will overwhelm you and you will quit. So if you see a guy just making lines of fires outside a bank like the good old days, don't berate him for not being efficient, because it's way too much work to play at max efficiency. Sometimes the most efficient training method is the one that doesn't burn you out.
Players want to maximize their gameplay efficiency, and Jagex know this. They even encourage it because you can pay for the Rune Metrics add-on, an official analysis tool which tracks experience uptime and downtime, resource input and output, a wealth tracker, combat damage and experience tracker per hour. You can even add a red glow to your character when you hit a low health threshold. Efficiency is an insidious thing in RuneScape 3, and if you aren't careful, you will be swallowed up by its icy numerical embrace, never to be seen again. These training methods, however, require me to actively engage with the game. There are a lot of methods which are low engagement or totally AFK, gaining experience effectively while you sleep. We will look at those later. Back at the Lumbridge Catacombs, I'm taking down skeletons and gaining levels. I could even wear some new armor, but I'm thinking it's time for quests. Let's start with the classics. Cook's Assistant. The Lumbridge cook needs some help. It's the Duke's birthday and he doesn't have the ingredients for a cake, so we agreed to go and help. Now, old players will know that you need an egg, some milk and some flour, and if you have them all on you, you can just hand them in right now and immediately complete the quest. But RuneScape 3 has changed this. You now need a special egg, special flour, and special milk, which can only be collected once you are on the quest, which is a cheeky way of making players actually do the quest. Now, you will need a bucket and a pot. Thankfully, these items can be found in the kitchen where the quest starts, and that's something RuneScape 3 does a lot. If you need an item on a quest, chances are you'll just run into it somewhere, at least in the early and mid-game. There are a few moments getting to the end of a long journey ends with, oh, you need a rope, and forcing you to backtrack. Gilly Groats in the cow field lets us milk the prized cow. Millie the Miller in the local wheat field lets us make some high-quality flour at the windmill, and you can find a super large egg with the chickens. Quest done. That's 2 quests out of lots.
On the quest list, you'll see some old quests like Demon Slayer show the year they were first released and then the year they were remastered, so returning players get something to do, even if they already kind of know it. So let's do it. Head to Gideon at the church in the main city of Varrock. Now, while walking there, another issue, which is going to become a problem soon. You'll see the quest list breaks quests down into in-game chronological order, taking part in the 5th Age or the 6th Age. Now, RuneScape has always historically been set in the 5th Age of Gielinor, but the epic quest, The World Wakes, ends by you becoming the World Guardian and bringing in the 6th Age. During this age, some of the gods, previously only known through scripture or champions, physically return to the land. The problem is this doesn't happen when you finish the World Wakes quest. It's live now, even if you haven't narratively reached it.
So a brand new player can just walk up to Saradomin, the actual god Saradomin, and have a chat. Zamorak is just hanging around. Guthix is canonically dead, despite there still being quests in the game where his worshippers talk about him being alive, despite still being quests where you meet him. This is because RuneScape's overworld changes with the timeline, but the old quests and the long-running storylines remain. Every player's personal journey starts in the 5th Age, but the overworld is physically in the 6th. This means you can, if not careful, complete quests out of canonical order, such as working with Saradomin himself one day, then reading about how all the gods are gone and will never return the next. We're in this situation because RuneScape, unlike games like World of Warcraft or Guild Wars 2, doesn't have massive expansions everyone joins at once, which advance the plot and world for everyone at the same time. Instead, the overworld is built to show the most recent events of the 6th age of the game, which makes total sense to people who have been playing it from the start, and actually triggered the 6th age by finishing the quests which herald it. But it's very confusing to new players who are still, in their own personal journey, living in the 5th age, not having experienced the World Wakes, and yet still being called the World Guardian, wondering why different quests are telling them different things about the reality of the world. So if you see things which feel out of place, that's probably why, because both the 5th and 6th age narratively and canonically exist sort of at the same time in a weird superposition on top of each other. Hey, remember how the world map didn't have quest start icons on it? It doesn't have lodestones either, but it should have. This is another free-to-play world-only issue. Free worlds have broken world maps. Please, Jagex, fix this. While here, I decide to use my daily treasure hunter keys, so let's do this. RuneScape is monetized. You can pay a monthly subscription to become a member and gain access to the members' world. More items, more quests, more skills, and honestly, I think the membership is pretty fair for the amount of content that you get. Plus, a membership counts across both RuneScape 3 and Old School, so you're getting 2 games for the price of 1.
Hello, Editing Josh here. Literally while making this video, Jagex increased the price of membership from $11 to $14, and it's important to note this is per character, not per account with multiple character slots. So if you want to play 2 different characters, say a main and an Iron Man on the same game, both with membership, you'll be paying $14 each. In contrast, World of Warcraft gives you 8 character slots for $13 a month, and both The Elder Scrolls Online and Final Fantasy XIV give you 8 characters for $15 a month. One of the strengths of RuneScape used to be that it was cheaper than other MMORPGs. That is not the case anymore.
Then you've got bonds, the things you can buy for real money and sell for in-game gold. This firmly cements RuneScape in the pay-to-win territory. Some people will argue it's pay for advantage, but I've already covered how those things are essentially the same parts on a spectrum. But then you've got Treasure Hunter, this absolute pile of freemium loot box, sunk cost fallacy, all style no substance, overpowered, overcosted mechanical advantage garbage, jangling the keys at you from the daily pop-up box. Making more money than it knows what to do with and parasitically clinging to the withering husk of a game we all once loved, benefiting from fleecing a player base who championed the game for so many years because it did precisely the opposite of whatever this is.
Historically, RuneScape was never monetized this way. One important element of the game was outside cash could not impact your character beyond being a member or not. You couldn't pay for experience or gold or items, and that was a guiding design tenet, one which a lot of players, myself included, very much respected. But back in 2012, we crossed the Rubicon on that when they introduced the Squeal of Fortune. Players got 1 free spin a day on the wheel. You could pay for more. Rewards ranged from small amounts of gold, experience, and worthless items to massive amounts of gold, experience, and incredibly powerful items, such as the lucky version of items, untradeable versions of some of the best stuff in the game.
This meant there was now an in-game way to give real money to Jagex and get gold items or experience in RuneScape. You just didn't know exactly which one you were going to get, which means on a very pedantic level it's not directly paying for power, and because Jagex maintained nothing in RuneScape has any real-world value, it's also not gambling. The wiki shows a screenshot of one of the prizes, 200 million coins, and back when this released, that was an insane amount of money to have. Regular players would likely never see this amount, and it was now possible to just win. Meaning if you were a casual player, winning this is probably the only way you would ever see this amount of money. The majority of players hated this and were very vocal about that, but it worked because a minority spent a lot of money in a very short amount of time, so it became a design choice they expanded on. Unfortunately, audience goodwill is a currency, and cashing it in for a quick payday always has long-term negative effects. The theory is similar to a shop selling its own internal fittings at the end of the year just to boost its final yearly income figure. You suddenly discover when the new year starts you have to buy it all back. The Squeal of Fortune went through a few revisions over the years, and the current version is called Treasure Hunter. You get a free key a day, members get 2. You can get far more for completing quests, and often there are promotions to buy a load and get a load free because FOMO makes a lot of money. The wiki has a whole gallery of the various promos over the years, and the prizes have kept up with inflation because back in April of 2024, the highest coin prize ever was added, 1 billion coins. And each week, the theme of the chest opening changes with extra rules or modifiers, some giving more prizes if more chests are opened. In the process of making this video, I experienced 11 7 different treasure hunter promos, each with their own unique mechanic, each requiring an absurd number of keys to win before the promo ended. But treasure hunter keys aren't the only real cash item. Any good designer will tell you there's value in complexity, especially if you're trying to make a monetized system. You want currencies linked to other currencies, gained at different rates, spent in different ways, converted in different manners. The steps you take, the further from an actual value you get, the harder it is to relate the thing back to the real world value of the thing. So from Treasure Hunter, you can also receive oddments. They are stored as a currency, and you can spend them in the in-game marketplace, previously known as the oddment store. You can use oddments to buy more keys, or experience lamps, pulse cores, items to transport you to places. You can even buy protein packs, or spring cleaners, but what are they? Well, protein materials are special versions of regular skilling items. They are stackable, unlike regular versions, and usually don't produce any output from the process, but do provide massive experience boosts. You can combine these with a protein processor, which is an extremely rare treasure hunter reward, which can consume 2,000 protein items instantly to grant all of the experience that would have granted in one go, which, as you can imagine, is insanely good experience per hour. A spring cleaner is another item from Treasure Hunter. It can be worn in the pocket slot and charged up, and while charged, it can automatically break down drops you get into different components without you needing to interact with them, or just give you bonus experience, or send items to the bank for you, or high-alch them and just give you the coins as drops automatically. Now, this might sound like you don't even need to play much of the game to get a ton of skilling experience. Just drop a load of cash on treasure hunter keys, gain a load of lamps and gold and boosting things. At least it's only skilling advantages though. It's not like you can train combat by doing this. Combat training dummies are treasure hunter rewards. You can set them up and attack them, giving experience in melee, mage, range, even slayer, a skill which is specifically about traveling the land and killing specific enemies in specific ways. You can now train it by not doing any of those things. You can even attack other players' training dummies. Just be aware you'll receive a fraction of the experience compared to if you placed it yourself. But what if you want to do all of this while looking cool and Treasure Hunter just doesn't have the drip you want? Well, head on over to Solomon's Store, another cash shop where you can spend rune coins, a currency bought with real-world money through Jagex, or spend loyalty points, a currency you earn by being a member for several months in a row, or part of the Premier Club. Solomon's Store contains cosmetic overrides, from brand new particle effect-filled over-the-top stuff to classic recreations of old armor looks. You can buy auras, wings, pets, special emotes, or animation overrides. You can look like you're wearing super cool armor while not actually doing that, so while you used to see someone in amazing armor and be in awe that they could afford it, or complete the difficult quest to get it, now you don't know if it's just an override they got at the shop. And Solomon's Store isn't just a web page, it's an in-game shop found right outside the Grand Exchange in Varrock, one of the busiest thoroughfares in the game. You cannot miss this shop. But at least all of this, the experience, the items, the cosmetics, they can prepare you for a boss, but they can't actually kill the boss for you. No amount of money can do that, right? The Death-Touch Dart is a rare item from Treasure Hunter, or you can buy one from the Travelling Merchant for 5 million coins. When thrown, this dart will one-hit kill about half the bosses in the game. If you don't want to grind the corporeal beast, you can one-hit kill it. If you're tired of dealing with necks in God War's dungeon, you can one-hit kill them. If the Zok Jad is giving you trouble in the fight caves, you can one-hit kill him. Thankfully, this dart doesn't work on everything, but it still trivializes far more bosses than it should, and the amount it should trivialize is 0. We can see the original design philosophy of advancement in RuneScape happens through playing RuneScape and your real-world wealth doesn't have any effect is completely gone. Treasure Hunter means the more money you drop, the more in-game gold, experience, and items you can have. And this cash shop advantage links back to the paradox of efficiency from earlier, because there will be a point where you have to balance your own real-world hourly income against the costs of Treasure Hunter keys and the progress you would make by grinding away all day, and decide if you would actually progress more in RuneScape 3 by going to work and then spending that day's wages on keys for experience and items. There is an income point where the most efficient way to progress RuneScape is to go to work. But what is that point? Well, in the UK, the minimum wage is £11.44 per hour right now, and a bond is £6, so you can buy just under 2 bonds for 1 hour's work. To keep the maths simple, let's say 2 bonds an hour. You could sell 2 bonds in RuneScape 3 right now for 265 million coins, so if you are trying to make gold in RuneScape 3, unless you are earning over 265 million coins per hour in the game, you are technically gaining less gold than if you spent an hour working a minimum wage job and then just bought bonds. And if we go to the RuneScape Wiki money-making guide and look at the highest gold per hour method it currently lists, killing Telos, that is still only listed as generating roughly 213 million coins per hour. Now, there will be extremely rare drops that skew this average, but if we take this as a consistent average, that means that the most effective money-making method in RuneScape is to spend real money on RuneScape.
Everyone agrees RuneScape 3 on some level is pay to win. But there's one silver lining to this otherwise cash-filled cloud. RuneScape 3 makes a lot of money. But you can see the live player counts of both RuneScape 3 and old school RuneScape, and RuneScape 3 has a far smaller player base. I think Jagex know if RuneScape 3 style monetization ever comes to old school, players would leave. The player numbers would fall to RuneScape 3 levels, which is not sustainable. It's still a successful game, but it's nowhere near as culturally significant. Old school has the YouTube videos, the Twitch streams, it has the memes. RuneScape 3, financially, is the bastion, the line in the sand against this type of monetization coming to old school. If Jagex want to make more money quickly, they can just throw a key promo at RuneScape 3, throw some classic cosmetics in the shop, put another training dummy in, stick 3 billion gold in the treasure hunter. Why not? Because doing that to RuneScape 3 means they're not doing it to old school. And this discussion does come up often, with Jagex sending out emails asking how everyone feels about monetization. You can't avoid treasure hunter promos every time you log in. You can't avoid seeing Solomon's shop in the game. The only way to avoid this is to play as an Iron Man. That's the #1 bit of advice you'll get if you ask around. So thank you, RuneScape 3, for being the sacrificial lamb on the altar of profit. Keep bleeding treasure hunter keys if that's what it takes to keep the vultures away from old school RuneScape.
Back to Demon Slayer. The experienced lamps from Treasure Hunter boost me to 23 range, meaning I can now use a willow shortbow, so I must chop a willow tree, meaning I need higher wood cutting, meaning a better axe, so I mine for some more ore for better smithing, and the whole upgrading process starts again. RuneScape is a constant cascade of minor improvements. Gideon Bade needs help killing Danath, a cultist trying to raise the demon Delrith. We need to find the sword Silverlight. He asks us to climb down the trapdoor and solve the riddle of the 3 spirits and receive the sword. Now the quest is pretty simple, and again self-contained. A small room with 3 sections, 3 trials, one about killing skeletons to prove our physical strength, one about faith by following the instructions given and walking over specific squares to cross a chasm, and one about proving our mental resolve by answering questions about why we are there, which will probably be the most challenging part of the quest for all these spacebar mashing speed questers who don't read the dialogue. Pass the tasks, get Silverlight, find a note leading us to a secret trapdoor in Eastern Varrock. Head down, confront Danath. Too late, he's already summoned Delrith, so we fight. But the boss fight has mechanics. The demon fires a powerful area of effect attack at us, and you must run to Gideon Bade and stand inside his shield to absorb most, but not all of the damage. Survive the attacks, kill the demon, get to keep the sword. Now I know Demon Slayer from the old version. I have nostalgia, but I really like this update. 3 trials, bit of exploring, and a boss. Simple, yet effective. But a stunning remake is Rune Mysteries. If you played old school, you'll know this is the quest where the Duke of Lumbridge gives you a random parcel for the Wizard's Tower, and you run back and forth between the tower and Varrock for an air talisman and the power to craft runes. But somebody at Jagex thought this was boring, and they were correct, so they remade the hell out of it. See that giant blue tower? That's the Wizard's Tower, and they have a problem with some sort of out-of-control magical energy. This is another Ariane quest, and in a nice touch, she recognizes you from helping Xenia in the Blood-Pact Catacombs. So the magical energy, it's causing a mess in the tower. We're given a Mind Spike staff and told to cast some spells to lure the vortex of energy into the central magical column of the tower. This central magical pillar is also how you teleport from floor to floor of the tower, so form and function. Ariane says she's been having visions of something bad happening within the tower, but Archmage Cedrador has set up a magical ward to keep her out, because Ariane is a Zamorakian sympathizer. We ask around, and at the top of the tower talk to Wizard Triborn. He says the power fluctuations in the main beam are probably because this tower was built on the ruins of the old tower, and the magical energy down there is a bit chaotic. Archmage Cedrador says this is not a problem. He's going to send a massive surge of Icenic energy down the beam to flood the ruins of the old tower, destroying whatever is down there. However, Wizard Elrond tells us many years ago Ariane was his apprentice. He believes she may be sensing something, so he encourages us to go to the ruins and have a look before the purge happens. The old ruins are, however, locked, and Elrond can't give us the key, but he does know a riddle, something to do with water surge and how old mage Perrin wrote a book about music. We find that book in the library. Water surge is a spell from RuneScape's history, and the runes being shown are the
the old ones. That's a nice throwback to original RuneScape. This is all connected to a puzzle with the organ in the tower having a hidden code matching notes that you play with the runes. So we play that, find the key, and head down into the old tower. And this bit is great. We learn about the 4 schools of magic and the gods: the blue lawful Saradomin, the red chaotic Zamorak, the green balanced Guthics, and the grey order, worshippers of lesser-known gods like the Desert Pantheon or Armadile, god of the skies. This rune guardian thinks we are a new wizard come to join the tower, so quizzes us on how we approach magic, and your answers will get you one of 4 possible name suffixes: the blue, the red, the green, or the grey. You can change this later. Name suffixes and prefixes combined into titles were added back in 2009, and coming from my favourite now removed minigame, Mobilizing Armies. There are currently 641 titles in the game, earned through minigames, killing hard bosses, finishing quests, finding achievements, completing collections, maxing a player-owned port or farm, reaching the high scores, or bought from the shop. They are fun. The problem is when you right-click on a busy tile, the list of player names with prefixes, suffixes, and different colours is somewhat overwhelming. And I think by now, somewhat overwhelming is the best description of RuneScape 3. My answers make me a grey wizard, and at the base we find even more whirling vortexes of energy. We lure them onto the platforms and Ariane studies them, and it seems they are not random. They're actually the condensed magical essence of the wizards who used to live down here. Effectively their memories. If Cedrador does send the Icenic Purge down, it's likely these vortexes won't be destroyed, but empowered, enraged, and attack the tower above. So we have to go and stop that process while Ariane stays down here to cast a protection spell in case we fail. A backup, I like it. Back in the main tower, Cedrador will not listen to you. He demands silence for the ritual. Well, if it's silence you need, I guess we can just play the organ again, a lovely mechanical callback to earlier in the quest, a setup and a payoff. We distract the wizard and the tower is saved. Ariane is now outside and says to talk to her again in the ruins because she has learned a great deal. This directly leads to the sequel, Rune Memories, but that is a members-only quest, so we'll come back later. So that quest had NPCs with different motivations, history, magic, backup plans, mechanical callbacks. It was nice, and it tied into the lore and the world, but not every quest ties into the world as a whole. Some of them are completely standalone, no specific time period, no long epic plotline, just a problem, an adventure, and a solution. We call these bottle quests, and these can be some of the best moments in RuneScape, because they let the designers play around. They make RuneScape a playground for quest design. Like Broken Home. Because while RuneScape 3 has left the strictly medieval setting behind, it's embraced the potential this has opened up. Like making a Resident Evil-style, Lovecraftian horror homage to Alone in the Dark. Broken Home is a legitimately good horror story. East of Varrock, just before the River Salve, we meet Maria. She says there's a ghost in this mansion, it's killing people, can we help? So of course we do, but you can't take any items in. This is a standalone experience. Now when I was playing this quest, I took extensive notes about which rooms to go to, where the keys were, but honestly it's worth playing for yourself. You start in a grand hall, similar to a Resident Evil manor, and your world map is replaced with the mansion map. Doors are locked, you must find keys, but be careful. You'll catch glimpses of ghostly children walking around, and you can choose to right-click and peek through a door first before you go through. And if you see the ghost of Ormond on the other side, don't go through until he's left. This quest is Cluedo, Resident Evil, Lovecraft, and Alone in the Dark all rolled into one. The doors have symbols on them. You must find the correct keys. We enter this small side room and see a servant shivering, and then a great tentacle rips from the wall and swallows them whole. The quest is legitimately a bit disturbing. There are statues you can push and pull to solve a room puzzle, and magical notes scattered around detailing Ormond's treatment of his children, and his obsession with digging into the earth to discover a source of power down there. We find a bathroom and pull back a curtain, reveal another shivering servant, but they have no face and are trying to scream. As we progress, the building fills with a pink poisonous fog, forcing you to run through the damage to get to the new routes. A puzzle in a kitchen where we try to butcher a pig for its blood. Another room with a servant frozen in time but constantly screaming, a key lodged in her throat, and pulling it out kills her. The plot gets weirder and crueler. A servant left to die in a cell alone, forgotten and unfed, a malnourished child, and then as we walk down a corridor, a small ghost girl who morphs into a horrific writhing blob of flesh and teeth chasing us down the corridor. Down in the basement we find a hole dug into the earth which leads to an ancient asylum featuring a visitor logbook with our name in it. The soundscape switches to play clanking chains and hear faint distant cries.
We find some more keys, head back to the house and find a break curse spell. So when the terrifying blob of flesh appears again, we use the spell on it and can talk to it. Turns out they are a demon from the town of Centisten, imprisoned in the asylum unearthed by the digging. They took on the form of a small child to be friends with Ormond's son, and you can choose to absolve Ormond of the guilt he feels for the horrible things he did in life, or have the ancient demon eat him. However you deal with him, let Maria know, and the quest is done. You get given the Asylum Doctor's Ring as a reward, a pretty decent level 30 ring, but we're not quite done because Broken Home is a repeatable quest with extra challenges. Within the mansion and the asylum, you'll notice these locked chests, which you can only open when you have level 10 in every skill, and then 20, 30, up to 90 in every skill for the final chest. These chests give massive experience, but there's also a hidden upgraded version of the ring. If you can complete Broken Home in under 37 minutes without dying or eating any food, you'll get the Asylum's Surgeon's Ring, one of the best hybrid combat rings in the game. So that quest was a lonely quest about atmosphere. What about a fully voice-acted quest about an ancient demonic killer and a current murder? Head on over to the desert of Al-Kharid and talk to Sister Katharina outside the Sithardre Abbey to start One Piercing Note, famous for being the first voice-acted quest in RuneScape. Now remember, most of these low-level quests don't have level requirements, and if they do, they are very low, minutes of gameplay at most. So a new RuneScape player can go and do the good bit very quickly. But this combines with a really nice design touch. High-level content is very close, physically, to low-level content.
In most linear RPGs, even many MMORPGs, the difficult content is physically far away from the starting zone, so low-level players are unlikely to ever see high-level players. It feels like a linear journey from A to B to C, dividing players into geographical regions based on level ranges. RuneScape does not do that. Burthorpe is the starting area, RuneScape is low-level, Varrock is the basic main city, but all of them have NPCs, shops, and quests relevant to both mid and high levels. It helps the world feel alive when you see players of all skills and all powers running through the same cities, and it gives you something to strive for when you see a cool weapon or a bit of armor. To get to this low-level quest, we pass the Slayer Striker Worm Hunting Ground, a high-level combat zone where you may see players using high-level equipment to kill high-level Slayer enemies. RuneScape is dense. There's a lot going on in the overworld, a lot of skills and quests and level ranges all overlapping and intersecting, and I wish more MMOs mixed content of all levels geographically together like this.
We arrive at the Abbey of St. Elspeth, not the one from Magic the Gathering. Outside there's a troubadour troupe. The main man, Valerio, is paying respects to Sister Anna, a new nun who recently died. If you stand around, you can hear him singing.
Oh, she's dancing in the stillness to the beat of dancing drums, and she's dancing.
We speak to the head abbot and get asked if we can investigate this murder, because we definitely aren't the killer. We're given a notebook to keep track of the investigation, and off we go. Check the victim's rooms, talk to the other nuns, chat to Valerio, investigate the victim's body, and it seems Sister Anna has been stabbed with a claw-like weapon and her entire face has been ripped off. RuneScape has some brutal combat descriptions. We learn dancing is forbidden in the abbey, yet Valerio outside is a tempting, handsome man. We help one of the older nuns fix the clock tower and hear it ring the giant bell. We learn about the legend of St. Elspeth and the Ripper Demon. It is said the Ripper Demon would strike with terrible claws, then slice its victims' faces off, but one time the demon appeared. Elspeth, a warrior priest of Saradomin, sang so perfectly she stunned the demon, keeping it at bay for days, until she sang one perfect piercing note, which banished the demon back to the abyss, which is where the name of the quest comes from. But if Anna's mutilated body is anything to go by, it seems the Ripper Demon is back. Asking around, we find so many layers to this. Sister Anna had a previous relationship with Valerio, but Valerio also had a history with Sister Eleanor, unknown to the two. Then we hear a scream, rush to the basement and find a freshly killed sister, Sister Eleanor. Both women Valerio was connected to are now dead. The murders are stunning the abbey. We find Sister Cecilia having a mental breakdown on the steps, mumbling about how they're all going to die, and then the choir resolve to channel the spirit of St. Elspeth and sing to stop the Ripper Demon again. Eventually, we mock up a fake sister using a candelabra and a cabbage to lure the Ripper Demon into a trap. It works and we chase them up the clock tower. At the top, the demon grabs the old woman from earlier and the Ripper's mask slips off. Turns out it's Sister Anna, the original dead girl. The body with no face is not Sister Anna, but one of the dancing girls from the troupe outside. Anna believes she is the avenging spirit of St. Elspeth and is killing those who she sees as immoral, dancers. We demand she listen to the singing from the choir, and while she is distracted, we ring the bell that we fixed earlier, which knocks Anna to the edge of the tower. You can calm her down from this madness and try to talk to her, but in a final moment of lucid shame, she throws herself from the tower to her death. You can report all of this to the abbess, and then she asks if we found the killer. You can say it was Sister Anna, or, as I choose, explain that in a way, it truly was the madness of the Ripper demon. Finish the quest, get the Sithadre robes. They're not great, but it's a cosmetic keepsake to remind you of this little adventure. And you know what? It was a damn good self-contained adventure with believable characters and themes of possession, lust, secrets, madness, and redemption. You can do quests all day and go on loads of different engaging adventures. So I do. Outside the Edgeville Monastery, we find Sir Owen, and chatting to him starts the Death of Chivalry quest. Owen is the world's biggest Saradomin fanboy, and while talking, the actual god Saradomin shows up and says he's defeated Zamorak, and this is what I mean when I say the game can be played out of order. This is a 6th Age quest. If you play this before you become the World Guardian, the narrative makes no sense, so I'm going to walk away from this for the time being. Which is annoying, because it's one of the best quests, both mechanically and narratively. It's such an extreme irony that you let a brand new player have one of the best experiences early in the game that makes no sense narratively if you are a brand new player. So what quest should you do? If you want to play this game from the start, you can follow the quest list and sort it by in-game timeline. Or the wiki has a super handy guide where you can break the quests down in multiple ways, by difficulty, going from novice through intermediate, experienced, master, and grandmaster, or by timeline, which breaks them down into Pathfinder, then Adventurer, Champion, Heroic, Legendary, Mythic, World Guardian, and finally the Age of Chaos. Quests known as bottle quests, which are one-off adventures with no timeline affiliation, are listed too. There is still a flaw here though. Playing by timeline is absolutely the most narratively stable way to experience RuneScape, but this means jumping between quest series often. And if you find it difficult to track multiple plot lines at the same time, this gets really confusing. For example, following the actual in-game year timeline of RuneScape, the wiki suggests you do Biohazard, Jungle Potion, Elemental Workshop, Nature Spirit, then Recruitment Drive, which means you'll be starting and hopping between the Elf, Elemental Workshop, Maya Key, and Temple Knight storylines. So why not pick one quest and finish it? Well, that's because quests give great experience, but the Grandmaster quests of a series have super high level requirements, meaning the best way to reach them is to do more quests of other storylines to get experience faster. Quests are not effectively self-sustaining. You cannot follow one through to a conclusion without doing a load of other stuff first. So here's the plan. I'm going to follow this in-game timeline guide and do every quest I can within the 100 hours I've got, and when I find a series I really like, I'm going to try and hyper-focus on it and see how far I can get. It's unlikely I'm going to be able to reach any Grandmaster quests or become the World Guardian, but I'll give it a damn good try. I'm not going to go into extreme detail on every quest, because if I did, this video would be 8 hours long instead of 4, but I'll cover the basics, and if a quest does anything new or interesting, I'll point it out. So let's go. RuneScape doing what RuneScape does best, being a world of adventure containing quests. There's a restless ghost in the Lumbridge graveyard. Chat to Father Ernie, a hermit who lives in the swamp. Get a ghost speak amulet. Wear it, chat to the ghost. Turns out he's lost his head. Find it at a mining camp to the north. Restless ghost done. Farmer Fred needs us to shear some sheep. Now this was downgraded to a mini quest, but I'm a local hero, so it's good enough for me right now. Just be wary of The Thing, which is 2 penguins in a sheep costume. I suppose this needs some explaining. RuneScape has a whole questline about how penguins are secretly the KGB. They have a secret ice base, they are building a giant robot army to take over the world, and penguin spies have infiltrated the mainland. It sounds insane, but it's one of the best questlines. Great moments of humor when you need to infiltrate their ranks disguised as a penguin. Sheep sheared, what's next? The legendary Shield of Arav.
Old Guard players will remember this as a quest which actually needs 2 people to complete, needing you and a friend to join different gangs, find 2 halves of a shield, and then give them both to the king for 2 halves of a quest completion certificate. But this was changed back in 2017. One player can now join both gangs, and I think this design speaks to RuneScape in general. RuneScape 3 is very much a game you can play alone, together. There's very little in the world you need somebody else for, but you can choose to team up if you want to. The quests, bosses, challenges, you can do most alone, and for those mini-games that you do need a team for, there are matchmaking mechanics, dedicated worlds to find other people. I think this design choice of Jagex making the game solo-friendly while leaving in the possibility of optional team-ups is one of the reasons RuneScape 3 is still going. The MMO genre isn't as strong as it used to be, and online chat rooms aren't novel anymore. You can't hold a player base attention on "it's an online world with friends," because that's not novel anymore. Of course, there are still a load of players who value the social interaction, but many players want to feel they can log on, make progress, and log off without needing to match up schedules with multiple other people. It's digital parallel play on a global scale.
So, Shield of Arav. Reldo in the Varrock Library tells us there's a missing legendary shield. A book says it was stolen many years ago by the Phoenix Gang, so we hunt down the modern gang and ask to join. They say we can, but we must kill somebody called Johnny the Beard in Port Sarim, so we go and do that. Inside the Phoenix Gang hideout, we find one half of the shield. It seems many years ago the other half was stolen by the Black Arm Gang, so we go and join them as well by providing 2 Phoenix Gang crossbows, get the other half of the shield, and then give them to the king to finish the quest. On to Imp Catcher, another classic quest where you must kill some imps, find some coloured beads and hand them in to a wizard. It starts in the wizard's tower, so off we go, but on the way I bump in to May, the quest reward lady. Finishing quests gives you quest points, and these never used to have much use, but now May will reward you with stuff based on your total quest points. There's even a scoreboard close by showing who has completed what quest recently. May's quest caravan shop is great. You can get bonus experience or the Trials equipment. Each piece of Trials gear needs 25 quest points to unlock, and you can redistribute your points at any time. You don't spend them so much as allocate them. The Trials armor actually grows with the player, changing at 25, 50, and 75 defense. And if you're wearing a full set of Trials armor and die to a quest boss, you will gain a 1% defense boost per piece per death against that boss until you defeat it. So 5 deaths wearing 5 pieces of the set means a 25% defense boost. You can also unlock Vanquish, a hybrid spear weapon which changes between melee, range, and mage styles and increases damage against quest bosses. There's even a quest portal you can unlock which just teleports you to the start of the next quest. This I'm less enamored with because it removes the journey to get to the start of a quest, which removes an element of overworld exploration. It's a great example of less time getting to the thing, more time doing the thing. If you're a focused quester, May's shop is great, but it is members only. So you know what? Okay, I'm several hours in, I've seen some decent gameplay, some quality writing, let's do it. I buy membership, change my worlds, and wouldn't you know it, the world map issue is fixed. So you can clearly fix this, Jagex, but free worlds aren't high on the priority list. I head back to the Wizard's Tower to do the Imp Catcher quest, but hang on, we're a member now, so I can check in with Ariane from the Rune Mysteries quest. She's down in the old tower ruins, and it seems that protection spell she cast as a backup against the Icenic Purge kind of trapped her down here. So I get distracted and start Rune Memories, one of the better short quests. Getting distracted by something such as a quest or a boss will happen a lot if you explore RuneScape 3. As for Rune Memories, there's no combat here at all. It's purely exploration and solving an ancient puzzle. The magical vortexes are back, so we get some rune stones to capture the essence in, and then you use those stones on the chairs and desks around the old tower to trigger memory flashbacks. You watch the old students and masters bicker and scheme against each other. This quest actually explains how teleportation magic came to be, solving the ancient line of sight problem by rerouting the caster through the abyss, effectively folding space into a single place for that moment, like the engine in the film Event Horizon. It's a really nice explanation of an in-universe problem. It casts doubt on Saradomin being purely good or Zamorak being purely evil. It shows the human flaws of the magical masters and the naive, trusting nature of the apprentice. It ends with us discovering the true nature of Wizard Elrond from the current day, his real intentions. Ariane gets possessed by the combined spirits of the old masters and apprentices. We fight through the tower with Ariane ascending the power beam, and finally, the old masters put aside their differences and sacrifice their own existence to save the current reality. It's a really good quest. Back to Imp Catcher. First, we'll need a bowl of hot water, so fill an empty bowl at a water source, then use that on a heat source, like a range or a fire. And now chat to Wizard Mizgog in the Wizard's Tower. He's lost some beads and says some imps have stolen them, but then he passes us a note. It seems the beads that we find around the place are actually fake. The real beads have been taken by 4 specific imps to certain rune crafting altars, and we need to go and find them. If you do try to trade in the old-style beads for quest completion, Mizgog just shakes his head in disappointment. Having the new imp locations at the rune essence altars is a nice way of tying in and somewhat tutorializing rune crafting, a skill you learn from another Wizard's Tower quest. We find an imp at the air altar, and they challenge us to a race around the altar for the bead. So we run around several times and then the imp throws up the bead. In Al-Kharid at the fire altar, you fight an imp to get a bead. At the earth altar, the imp is depressed and you must cheer him up by choosing the correct chat options. And over at the water altar, the imp is congested, so you must use the hot water to clear his congestion to get his bead, then return to Wizard Mizgog. And can I just take a moment to say how fantastic this is on a technical tutorial level? You've got the quest, the locations are linked to important skilling locations, the runic altars, so it's geographically relevant, and then you get all 4 beads in 4 different mechanical ways. One of them needs movement, you run around in a circle. The other needs combat. The third has you navigate dialogue trees and chat choices, and finally, you use an item from your inventory, which itself was made by combining 2 other items. Movement, combat, talking, and using items is basically all RuneScape is, and to use all of them in a 5-minute, low-level, no-requirement quest is great. I actually dropped Mod Stu, the guy who remade Impcatcher, a message to say how impressive this small but densely packed quest was, and he responded saying he reworked it in a weekend for a game jam. They themed the 4 beads around the 4 Greek humours because of a suggestion from the player Aquamancer, and he had to include the Mizgog slipping you a note bit, as Mizgog was fully voiced already and they couldn't record new voice lines. Even the imp throwing up animation was reused snow, recoloured to yellow. Knowing the limitations of designs within MMOs makes simple stuff way more impressive, so nice one, Stu. But while I had Mod Stu's attention, I had another question, something I'd only just realised and occurred to me during the imp dialogue trees. There is no back button in RuneScape dialogue. If you miss a section or you spacebar through too fast, you need to click off the chat and restart it from the very start. Why is that?
You see, I assumed that a conversation tree loads the entire possible tree, and the player is just moving through it with options leading to new tree branches and some choices triggering moments like giving the player an item. Now, it may of course be possible to abuse this by repeating the give item trigger, but you can do that already by restarting a conversation, dropping an item and then just asking for it again. So why can't you go back? Well, Stu explained to me, and this is proof of the absolute jank that RuneScape is made of behind the scenes. RuneScape cutscenes take place in the game engine, sometimes in the overworld, sometimes in an instance. But the cutscenes sometimes involve objects moving around or doing animations. This means they all have to start in a certain place. So restarting a chat or a cutscene completely resets it. Because if you could go back, you would break the way the engine works.
Every time you click through a chat box, it might send instructions for the game to do something, like move an NPC or make an animation happen, but by clicking back it would not undo this. It can only happen forwards. So if reaching a certain chat box screen also has the trigger NPC walks 2 tiles east and the camera zooms out slightly, if you could spam click back and forth, clicking back would not undo it, but clicking return would redo it. They would walk east every time repeatedly from where they were, not where they started, and the camera would keep zooming out from where it ends, not where it began. These things would never reset. Each chat box doesn't know what came before it or what's coming after, so reading them in a linear way is the only way RuneScape can work without breaking. Thank you for this, Stu. Imps found return to Berthorpe and explore Death Plateau. It seems trolls on the mountain to the north are threatening the human camp, so we're tasked with finding a secret route around or through the mountain so the human army can flank them. We do this by speaking to a dwarf with an extremely strong Newcastle accent.
Ambush the trolls, eh? But it's not my problem.
The dwarf says we'll need some climbing boots, which are probably one of the most infamous items in RuneScape's history and deserve a video all to themselves. We grab some from this lovely lady, the blacksmith fixes them up, and then we dig a hole straight through the mountain. Inside the cave system, we make our way past obstacles, squeezing through gaps, hopping over standing stones, and eventually find an overlook. We feed this important information back to the humans, and a cutscene shows our brave archer boys ambushing the invading trolls. Quest done. Time to help the druids, who I appreciate all have joke names. This guy, Cake Mix, or his friend, Dot Matrix, or Pickup Sticks. There's even one called Scalextrix. Cake Mix needs help making a potion, so we do some fishing, collect some bark from Wandering Wormwood, and get some living water from the same cave we killed abominations in earlier. Druidic ritual done, herb lore learned. Time for Let Them Eat Pie, a rather gross-out quest about poisoning a local businessman by making the world's most disgusting food, which sees us placing a potato inside a kebbit burrow to ferment for a bit and grinding fishing bait into the flour of the crust. But any feelings of guilt at poisoning this man go out the window when you meet him, and he is just the worst person. The game even gets a bit meta and says, we did record rather visceral sounds for this bit. Do you want to listen to them? And of course you say, yes. Visceral sound warning now.
Oh, God, there's more!
After hearing the guy be aggressively, violently sick, one of the restaurant staff members is shell-shocked, rocking backward and forward on the floor, curled up, talking about how they had to mop the ceiling. The reward for this quest is one of the more mechanically interesting ones, a pouch of spices. It's a neck item and adds an extra 50 points of healing to any food we eat. Unfortunately, it's not as good as just anything else. There's a load more quests we can do here. The Wolf Whistle quest, which is about summoning. The Druid Betamax has been captured by trolls, so we make a powerful Wolpertinger summon pouch and go and save them, very short. And then we begin the Witch's House quest. Ah, right, this one. Little Harvey has lost his ball over the fence. It's landed in the witch's garden, so we go and get it back, break into her house, solve a really random puzzle where we lure a mouse out of a mouse hole, then put a magnet on its back, so when it runs back into the wall, it triggers a magnetic lock which unlocks the door, then play Metal Gear Gillinor where we sneak from hedge to hedge, avoiding this patrolling witch. We find the ball in the shed, but when you take it, we must fight the witch's experiment, which morphs through 4 phases, each phase getting more difficult than the last, and I actually cannot kill this. So I go to the weapon shop and pick up a new bow and some new armor. RuneScape is one of the few MMOs where the shops in town are actually useful. But even with the best items I can use, this enemy still kills me. So I'll put this on hold for now and just go and do other things, which is something I love about RuneScape's open world structure. Stuck? Just go and do something else. Thankfully, that something else is one of the best written quests in the game. Violet is Blue. Originally a temporary Christmas event, it received such good player feedback they let it stick around as a full quest. The snowy portal on the mountain teleports us to this Arctic forest. We run up a hill dodging some snowballs and hoping we don't run into any monsters, but far from it. This quest is just goddamn adorable. You find this hut, knock on the door and even say, "Do you want to build a snowman?" And when they say no, you can say, "Okay, bye." Here we meet Violet. She is a hairless Yeti, basically a human girl adopted by 2 Yeti parents. Violet wants to go to the Christmas Yeti festival, but it's too far to go alone and her parents are a bit too old to take her, so we agree to go with her instead. Cue one of the cutest, most adorable, most well-written low-stakes quests. You can even ask Yeti Dad for advice or objects needed for puzzles, and I love when you ask for a jar and he says, "What do you need it for?" You just reply, "Stuff," which is objectively correct. We are indeed using it for stuff. Violet is Blue sees us making heads for ice golems to match Violet's chatbox expression, machine gun throwing snowballs to clear a lake of skating trolls, or pushing Violet around in a sliding ice puzzle barrel. We end by making a sled from random junk, naming it Sleddy McSledface, and sliding into the Yeti Festival. Quest done, straight onto the sequel, Violet is Blue 2. We need to help an imp save Christmas. He's meant to have been delivering letters and organising the whole party, but forgot, so we have to help, and I loved this dialogue. It says, "Audible tears of sadness." Then you agree to help save Christmas, and it changes to audible sobs of hope. And when Violet has to get everyone's attention, she roars and proudly announces that she is 6.5. Undeniably adorable all round. Decorate the town, save Christmas, enjoy such stellar writing as NPCs earnestly asking, "Why does she have a bucket on her head?" 10 out of 10, no notes. Reward is a cosmetic override for the whip, turning it into a bunch of fairy lights. But I still cannot kill the stupid changing creature in the Witch's House quest, so it's time to bring out the big guns. Or more correctly, the big spells. Remember I said RuneScape traditionally has 3 combat styles, melee, mage, and range. Well, they added a 4th, Necromancy. They actually got me down to beta test it, and I've been avoiding using Necromancy for one reason. It's really, really good. Like, better than every other style, no downsides until the very end of the game, good. So good that once you start using it, there's no real reason to stop. So let's go and use it. Necromancy is interesting, as it's not just a combat style, but an epic quest series itself. You start by investigating this strange gate north of Draenor Village and getting killed by a floating sword. So let's discuss death. When you die in RuneScape, you get to meet Death in his office doing his clerical duties. All your items that you were wearing or carrying now belong to Death, but you can buy them back for a fee. So don't worry, even if you die in a dangerous place, you might not lose anything. Later, when I died during combat, it costs me 5,000 gold to reclaim several million coins worth of gear. Death in RuneScape 3 is trivial. But that's how normal death works. This is a bit different, because spirits don't seem to be passing on, so we travel with Death to the city of called that because nobody can remember its actual name. It seems we've been challenged to a duel to the death, the actual death, by the first necromancer, a powerful entity called Raziel, but to be a good sport, Raziel wants us to learn necromancy first. In a lovely touch, RuneScape actually recontextualizes necromancy itself, whereas normally it's about commanding the dead to do your bidding. Here it's about communicating with the dead and asking nicely if they'll help you do something. So we summon some long dead warriors, explain we're trying to get more powerful to fight Raziel, do they want to join us, and they are are well up for it. You train necromancy in 2 different ways, performing rituals at the ritual site in the city of and in combat. Doing rituals fills the Well of Souls, the giant hourglass structure, and gaining combat experience gives you talent points. Only when you have enough talent points and the Well of Souls is full enough can you advance through the necromancy skill tree and learn combat abilities and passive effects. It's effectively an entirely standalone combat style. You could be a necromancer pure if you wanted to. Necromancy, however, does not have weapon variety. Your weapon is always a death guard glove and a lantern. There's even a joke about the shop that sells these items. They say they absolutely hate necromancers. You say, if you hate them, why do you have so much of their stuff? They reply, we have so much of their stuff because we hate them. Both the necromancy weapons and the necromancy armor, the Death Warden robes, grow along with you. As you gain levels, you upgrade the equipment, meaning no enemy will ever drop a better weapon or a bit of armor for necromancy. This really does take away from the mishmash of equipment RuneScape is known for. Every necromancer effectively uses the same weapon and same equipment. They will look and play exactly the same up until maximum level. I go and test out combat in a cave on some more trolls. Necromancy is about throwing short-range bursts of necromantic damage or summoning helpers like this skeleton. But the word summon relates to the summoning skill, so technically these are conjures and will unlock more as we level up. Conjuring requires the ectoplasm tertiary ingredient, and you gain that from doing rituals. Rituals all happen on the ritual site. You must clean the place first, light some candles, and then use some components. Then use ink to scribe certain symbols onto the actual slabs. This ritual requires a fragile memento. The wiki says it's found in the divination skill, so let's go and do that quickly. I'll be honest, I do not understand the divination skill. I don't know what it is. Apparently the world leaks memories in the form of energy orbs, and you harvest them and then kind of vomit them back into the soil. You can then manipulate the energy into magical stuff like temporary fishing bubbles or mining rocks, or make portents which increase your skilling experience. Honestly, I don't think divination is anyone's favorite skill. It feels like a solution in search of a problem. I give up training divination just for the reagent, as I'd still need to kill wyverns for a special bone, and that needs way higher combat, so I just kill trolls and train necromancy that way. Necromancy is also unique in combat, as instead of using your accuracy percent as a chance to hit, your chance to hit is always 100%. The accuracy number is now your damage per hit in relation to your maximum possible damage. So necromancy is an extremely consistent combat style. Completing quests has given me a load of treasure hunter keys, so I've been saving them all up. I use them all in one go, and I've managed to jump up to level 47 necromancy in one go. That is massive in the early game. I can now start my necromancy armor upgrading process. RuneScape 3 can't have anything be simple. It's always steps within steps, items within items. I need to do some more rituals, combine weak necroplasm to create lesser necroplasm, mix ashes with vials of water, then add the necroplasm to make ghostly ink, use that to draw sigils, do a quest, enchant some tools, then go and kill 30 chickens for a blood sacrifice, and now I can access the Soul Forge and upgrade my necromancer armor and weapons, but doing this needs crafting. So I guess it's time to craft, mine some clay, make some pots, and once again we've been distracted from our main goal by several steps of a process of smaller goals. I want to do quests, so I'm doing pottery to make my necromancer armor to finish the quests. But there is one decent way of making both mining and crafting experience, and that is mining gem rocks. I tried to buy a steel pickaxe from the Grand Exchange, but this is such a low-level item, no one is selling it. So I head to Bob's Axes in Lumbridge and get one there. Then I go and mine some gems. Older players may remember gems, sapphire, emerald, ruby, and diamond, as random chance things from mining regular rocks. Well, now they have dedicated gem rocks. I can cut them and gain experience. If I were a higher fletching level, I could make them into bolt tips, and this would let them stack, but I'm not good enough at that yet. But filling up my inventory is a problem, so here's a tip. If you put an item on your hotbar by dragging it from your inventory, if that item doesn't actually have a use when activated, like eating or casting, then pressing the hotbar button will drop it. So you can set a button to drop things as you gather them quickly. Mine a load of gems and cut them, and this is where the efficiency question rears its ugly head again. With a limited time to play, do I mine my own gems and cut them for experience, or work out how many gems I'm mining per hour, work out how much that would cost to buy, then find a way to earn more than that per hour and buy the gems, thus increasing my game time efficiency? Play long enough and it's an unavoidable question that we all already know the answer to. The answer is the credit card. The process of upgrading your necromancer equipment isn't over yet. Now I need an unensouled bar of metal, which needs bronze, iron, and steel mixed together, then a ritual, which means I need spider silk from spiders, and oh my god, this process is so long. I take some time away from this grind to finish the Knight's Sword Sword quest. Welcome to Falador, city of the White Knights. No, not Reddit moderators, these guys. Holy Knights of Saradomin. This squire has lost his master's sword, so we go and find a super special dwarf who can make a copy, give him some redberry pie to make him like us, get some blue-right ore, make the sword, done. And on our way, we pass through Port Sarim. This is where the player-owned ports minigame is. Over the years, RuneScape has really got into the whole build this settlement up from nothing over many months mechanic, because it gives such long gameplay goals. It started with player-owned houses and the construction skill, and then player-owned ports, and then the player-owned farm, and then Fort Ferinthe. The houses and ports exist within player-specific instances, while the farm and fort exist in the shared overworld with preset locations for buildings to be placed, but only you see them. While doing rituals in the city of to upgrade my necromancer equipment, I see someone wearing a green party hat, and this matters. The party hat, probably the most iconic RuneScape item, has gone through a very strange life. The Christmas Cracker holiday item drop was back in 2001. Pulling a cracker with another player gave one player a party hat and the other a gift, and at the time of release, the gift was slightly more valuable as it was actually useful rune equipment. Then the Christmas Cracker was discontinued, but the few which remained unpulled, and the party hats that came from the previous ones, were tradable, becoming one of the first unobtainable rare items, so demand for the party hats suddenly increased. When the item duplication glitch was discovered, and there are some excellent YouTube videos on this, players flooded the market with party hats to make a lot of gold very quickly. So many, in fact, it rebalanced the distribution and demand for specific colours. No one at the time wanted the blue hat, so fewer blues were made, which ironically now makes blue the rarest. So RuneScape grew, the party hat cost increased, and over the years, it eventually reached a real-world value of several £1,000s. RuneScape was simply that popular, and the in-game bragging rights meant that much. Christmas Cracker or party hat trades went for well over a maximum cash stack, needing super rare items to balance the trades. In my almost 20 years of playing RuneScape, I've only ever seen one Christmas Cracker in a trade and a handful of party hats. But then Old School RuneScape released, and remember these are separate games, you didn't transfer your character over, and in 2013 they had the Christmas Cracker drop event in Old School RuneScape, and they gave out party hats, but Jagex learned from history and didn't want to create another mega expensive, ultimately unobtainable, yet tradable rare item. So this Cracker drop happens every year in Old School. This means party hats in Old School RuneScape are extremely cheap. They are not rare by design. This means the ultra rare expensive version of party hats are in RuneScape 3, the less popular of the two games. And many of RuneScape 3's player base are ultra high level or long-time players, meaning you actually see party hats a lot more frequently than you did before. They are still an incredible status symbol, still worth thousands of real-life pounds in the real-world trading space, but they're not as elusive as they were 10 years ago. If you play RuneScape 3 for a few days or hang around in high-level trading hubs, chances are you'll see a few party hats. It's a fascinating reality that the status symbol, the hat itself, hasn't changed, but the game it shows status in has, and it's the overall decline in the player base of the game, not the desirability of the item, which has led to the party hat becoming less culturally relevant. It's not that people don't care about party hats, it's that people don't care about RuneScape 3. While doing the necromancy rituals, I ask everyone else why they play this game, what's keeping them here, and the answers are all pretty similar. Number go up, brain happy. And RuneScape 3 is a fantastic number go up game. There are a load of skills, all trained quickly. Some people yearn for the days of slow, endless grinding, weeks between the most minute of improvements. What many would consider the classic hardcore MMO experience. RuneScape 3 is pushed in the opposite direction. Number goes up fast. New item, new armor, new spells, new locations, new weapons, new quests, new enemies. It's fast. Potentially too fast. It started to push into the overwhelming territory. Skills can level up without you understanding what the previous levels brought. Weapons get given to you. Quests pull you along. If you imagine the pacing in any MMO as the current of a river, old hardcore games have you fighting against the current and drag you back if you fail. Well-paced games have you swimming with it, and some games drag you along far too fast. RuneScape 3 is approaching the faster current. It's a good example of feature creep taking over a game and being a barrier to new players. If you play a simple game, a new thing gets added every 2 or 3 months, you can keep up with this. Have enough time to understand it. Eventually it becomes something that you just see as part of the furniture. You consider it normal. But when a new player joins and they're shown years of small additions all at once, that is overwhelming. Indeed, Necromancy is a perfect example of the new design complexity versus the old simplicity. Take an old skill, woodcutting, cut down trees, or an old combat style, magic. use runes to cast spells. Those skills can be understood by anyone, they're widely known fantasy tropes, but the way RuneScape does necromancy is far more mechanically advanced. It's closer to a complete gather, craft, use cycle than a combat skill. And it's not easy to just get it. I think that's the biggest difference between old school and RuneScape 3. You can play old school RuneScape and get it, because it uses tropes and archetypes of the fantasy genre, whereas RuneScape 3 has tried to become its own thing enough that you need to actually learn it. And this is a double-edged sword because MMORPG players claim to want novelty, and yet in reality they want enough familiarity for the novelty to be novel in relation to something they already understand. I trained some more combat skills and discovered there's an achievement called My Skeleton Can Beat Up Your Skeleton, which you achieve by having a summoned skeleton kill an enemy. That's a nice touch. Eventually I go back to the Witch's House quest and fight the shape-shifting creature again. I win with the power of necromancy, and now we're back to some serious questing. Myths of the White Land, a series of short sliding ice puzzles to find the treasure of the Yeti, which turns out to be Yeti dung. Ernest the chicken. Veronica has lost her fiancé in the big scary Draenor Manor, so we head inside, find out Ernest is now a chicken due to a mad experiment, and solve a series of puzzles within the house to find the bits needed to fix the machine to reverse the process. This quest has the famous switches in the basement opening different doors puzzle, but thank God they've added colours to the doors and the switches, a small quality of life upgrade to make it not totally infuriating. Swept away. Witches need a broom enchanted. Solve 3 puzzles. A magical menagerie needing creatures to go back into the right pens, a 3-box puzzle with the wrong labels where we can only take 1 item to figure out where the labels should go, and the remove a line of dust to leave 4 triangles on the ground puzzle. RuneScape very heavily leans into the visual, lateral thinking puzzles in its design. Vampire Slayer. Dr. Harlow gives us a stake and a hammer and asks us to kill a vampire in Draenor Manor basement. I like how both Ernest the Chicken and Vampire Slayer take place here. It's a great example of reusing old environments to give the sense of familiarity, combining with novelty. RuneScape's world is dense. Locations don't just exist for one thing, they exist because they make sense to exist, and multiple things happen within them because that's how the world is. Impressing the locals, a quest about assembling a team of people to go exploring. This relates to the player-owned ports, but you need at least 90 in one skill to even start this whole minigame, so it's a real late-game thing. A great example of limitations enhancing connection is the quest Pirate's Treasure. We need to smuggle some rum from the southern island of Karamja for this crusty old sea dog at Port Sarim. The only issue is Karamja has strict import-export laws, and we cannot sail off with it, nor can we teleport, as that will affect the flavour of the rum. So we must join a local banana plantation, fill a crate with bananas, stash the rum in the crate, then find the crate once it's been delivered to the mainland by joining this shop and retrieve the rum. A great RuneScape example of solving a problem using the local infrastructure. And notice how removing the ability to teleport actually forced us to engage with the NPCs, the businesses, the trade, the content of the island, helping us understand why the rum mattered. Next up, Shadows over Ashdale, another Lovecraftian horror, ancient sea creature type quest, but this one really shows the new design skills quite well. We travel to Ashdale, a rundown seaside town. We get rain effects, a rather impressive city covered in strange slime, and I have to praise the excellent use of environmental lighting here, brightly illuminating a doorway in the drab, dreary distance to guide the player into the building. We discover the local people are being taken, so we travel through the city, fight some strange Crassian creatures, and I like how the camera dynamically swings around when you enter a building to highlight the important stuff within it. However, as technically impressive as this is the kind of quest which doesn't have the vibe of old school RuneScape. I said at the start of this video that newer quests feel like mini expansion modules instead of adventures happening within the main world, and this leads to a sort of emotional disconnect. I don't know this land because I've never been here, so it feels like a filler arc, temporary NPCs, temporary locations. Nothing here matters in the rest of the game. The camera swinging is technically impressive, yes, but it drags RuneScape away from adventure RPG into cinematic experience. But the cinematic experience itself is focusing on style over substance. Eventually we see some more Crassian warriors. We can't fight them, so need to Metal Gear our way around and pull some levers to kill them with traps. RuneScape quests do have a mechanical variety within them, but not variety of solutions. You cannot choose to fight or trap, and many puzzles only have one solution, even if that solution contradicts a similar solution of a similar puzzle in another quest. Eventually under the city we board a missing ship and fight a Kraken boss. The tentacles wrap around the ship and you have to dodge past them as they slam down, then throw some damage back on. It's a fun little boss. Next up, Once Upon a Slime. Let's go from serious dark Lovecraftian horror to absolute absurdism. King Slime has returned to Rimington and we must get him to fall in love with Queen Slime, so they elope and leave us alone. To do this we must find the largest top hat in the world. Thankfully for us, Thessalia in the Varrock clothes shop has just finished making the world's second largest top hat and she gives it to us. I like how the character Peter has his dialogue written in phonetic Scottish, but it turns out the top hat is too big. Thankfully we hear of a shrinking
machine in Varrock, so we shrink the giant top hat into a tiny giant top hat, then pour some smelly goop onto the king slime to entice the queen further. Then we are forced to watch the player and Peter's reaction to the slime's mating, which is interesting. RuneScape quests really do span quite the emotional range. From that to Song from the Depths, where we take a special potion and enter into a magical waking sleep and see the spirits of local men enticed by the haunting singing of a siren walking into a local cave. We follow them, solve a rather metaphysical puzzle of growing a plant from filling a pot with soil to watering it and then ultimately jumping down into a dark chasm. We end up in the stomach of something and discover the siren is down here with us, convinced she's on a beautiful beach somewhere. Turns out the entire cave is inside the Queen Black Dragon boss. The siren was swallowed and used as bait to lure men's souls in. This is the precursor for the Queen Black Dragon boss, but you need 60 summoning to fight her, so we'll come back later. Gertrude's cat. She's lost her cat. Go and find it. I guess the old RPG joke of level 1 save a cat, level 100 kill God also applies to RuneScape. This quest gets you a kitten as a pet. Having a kitten out and following you around will let it grow into a cat, which is needed for future quests. RuneScape has quite a few pets which can follow you around. Most skills have an associated skilling pet with them, which can randomly drop whenever you gain experience in that skill. Some bosses have pet versions of themselves as drops. Pet collection flexing is the true endgame of RuneScape 3. The Heartstealer quest is lovely. 2 daring thieves have hit a bit of a career rut, and as it's their anniversary, ask you to help plan a special heist. We get some disguises from Thessalia, and notice how we've been back to Thessalia multiple times. I love this. It makes Varrock feel like an important place. It makes one NPC feel like the solution to several problems. You don't solve this with a random ephemeral one-off shop. You go to Thessalia. Trusty, reliable Thessalia. Make some smoke bombs, infiltrate a party, distract the guests, have a dance battle to get some drinks vouchers, then give them all to a dwarf so he gets drunk enough to cause a scene, allowing us to sneak into the museum, avoid some patrolling guards, steal a ruby, and it turns out the whole thing was planned by one of the thieves as an anniversary present to the other. Very heartfelt. Goblin diplomacy. 2 goblins are arguing over what colour their armour should be. You bring them various dyed armours until they agree it should be brown, which was the colour it has always been. Great low-stakes emotional world building. Levels keep growing, requirements keep increasing, and now to improve my necromancy armor I need some Moga flippers, which require 32 Slayer to get, and a higher crafting level. But the curse of efficiency strikes again. I would do this faster with a gem bag, and you get this from Dungeoneering, so off to Daemonheim we go. I think it's safe to say Jagex have just given up with Dungeoneering. Currently they are having their summer beach party event. The beach is a load of minigames which give decent experience for just standing doing very little. But there is one event people flock to every year. Introducing The Hole. The Hole is a Dungeoneering training minigame. You click to descend into the hole and then wait. That's it. Players would rather do this than do the actual skill, and Jagex know this because every year the hole is the most popular thing on the beach. I think it's quite telling of the players' priorities when a yearly event which gives a load of free experience by just standing around doing nothing is preferred over the thing you're meant to be experiencing in, showing we have prioritized experience points over the point of the experience. But I'm an old traditionalist, and I'll train Dungeoneering the way Icthlarin intended by running Daemonheim floor after floor. But you may have noticed something about the adventure so far. It's been somewhat lonely. Even at the beach, the most packed place, there is a sense of alone together. I've not had to team up with anyone or even speak to many people. So I decided to change this. You can Dungeoneer with up to 5 people, a team all working together to solve a flaw. So I ask around if anyone wants to do a few Dungeoneering flaws with me, and nobody does. So instead, I call in a favour with Jagex. I tell them I'll keep RuneScape off the worst MMO ever list if they Dungeoneer with me. And that works a treat. This was actually a really fun few flaws, so big thanks to the Jagex lads for finding an afternoon to help me out. RuneScape's design, despite allowing everyone to adventure together, never really lent itself to the strengths of group play. Enemies didn't used to have an aggro meter, so you couldn't have a tank use a grab aggro ability. Instead, it was just whoever got attacked first is now tanking, and being unable to enhance or heal others to any relevant degree meant everything felt like a Zerg rush. Other MMORPG games were built around synergy of classes, differences enhancing differences, one player making up for the weakness of another. RuneScape never really had that. You never really felt you had a role within a team. You were just there, doing the same thing as everyone else. But here in Daemonheim, it's pretty fun. Everyone's skills are needed to open doors, take down Slayer enemies, make equipment, and take on the boss. I know from a technical point of view, Dungeoneering is a nightmare to program and balance, but it's a great example of a focused multiplayer experience playing to RuneScape's strengths. Use the tokens to buy the gem bag, then get back to mining for several hours, then some Slayer, then some more quests over in Canifis, freeing a trapped Saradomin monk Drezel from the Zamarakians, purifying a river, more Slayer to kill some moss giants, and oh my god, the Varrock sewers, I've not been here in years. Sort the Haziel cult out over in Ardoon, use the old drop trick to drop a quest item and ask for a spare to get 2 of the same item, then become the world's most violent sheep herder and prod several infected sheep into a furnace because they're infected with some sort of plague. Now we're off to the desert for the Stolen Hearts quest, which replaces the Prince Ali rescue quest a few years ago. This is a signature hero quest, remember them? And we get to adventure with the incredible Ozan, and this whole quest highlights the issues with signature heroes. This quest feels really self-indulgent, and I know that's rich coming from a guy who's making a 4-hour RuneScape video, but the dialogue, the events, the actions, even the cool set pieces, Ozan does them. You're just along for the ride. It feels as if a writer really loved Ozan's character and gave him a really cool story about intrigue, love, family obligations, politics, ancient gods, kidnapped princesses, and then remembered at the end, oh crap, gotta put the player in this somehow. I know, they can be Ozan's sidekick. This story is mostly about the Diamond of Ib, a powerful relic. The current leader of Al-Kharid is dying. Ozan wants the diamond, so we find it. The sequel quest Diamond in the Rough starts. We journey into the desert to find an ancient temple, jumping from a building into a haycart, Assassin's Creed style. Then fall into quicksand and the diamond gets stolen by an insect and we have to find it. And this is one of the few moments in the game that you cannot control the camera, or zoom in or zoom out. You are locked to this view, making this more of an interactive cutscene than a section of gameplay, and that's my big issue with the sweeping cinematic quests. RuneScape quests always felt grounded in the mechanics, but now the gameplay experience changes within the quest so much that it feels like an adventure you're not in control of, a ride you're sitting on and just experiencing. Turns out the diamond was taken by Lady Kelly, an evil godlike being. There's more political intrigue, but honestly, I've been told to care about these characters, but not shown why I should. I've not made any choices which make me feel connected to these events, so I just didn't care about this quest. I decided to take a quick break from questing and go and play some minigames. RuneScape is well known for the minigames. Castle Wars back in the day, Clan Wars, Stealing Creation, Pest Control, fun little group challenges which give decent rewards. Surely they are still alive and well. The in-game menu even says the current minigame spotlight is Stealing Creation, a skills and combat challenge against another team. The spotlight is a focused game which gives increased rewards, encouraging people to go and play that right now. There's even a dedicated Stealing Creation world, so off I go, and it's dead. There is one other person here. Okay, maybe Stealing Creation, even on the right world and when it's spotlighted, just isn't worth it. How about Pest Control, the Void Knights, the Void Armor? Surely that is still popular and decent. So I head on over, hop to the dedicated world, and wow. I mean, I expected at least a few people to still be here. It seems the ravages of time have left Pest Control and Void Armor so outclassed by basically everything else, or the player base shoot past the recommended level into better equipment so quickly, this content is just abandoned. There are 89 players in the entire world, and none of them are at the minigame the world is dedicated to. One of my favourite design choices of old-school RuneScape is how old content remains relevant for so long. The Barrows Brothers boss came out in 2005, and the rewards are still good. 20 years later, God War's armour is still good. Quest rewards are still beneficial. Old-school content does see power creep, as all MMOs do, but not to the extent of completely overshadowing old content, especially with the speed of leveling being slower. RuneScape 3, however, has it worse. New content can often make old content redundant, either a strictly better item, easier to get, lower level requirements, or a method of gaining experience so fast that other training is now forgotten. A good example is how Necromancy makes the other combat styles at low to mid levels almost irrelevant. The well-loved RuneScape design of "it's all worth doing" is still there, but it's being encroached on by power creep, faster and faster.
Quickfire quest round. Monk's friend. Sober up a monk, throw a party. Clock tower. Find some gears, fix a clock. Observatory. Make a telescope lens and look at some stars to solve a puzzle. Dwarf cannon. Find a small dwarven outpost. Save a child from goblins. Get rewarded with the ability to buy a cannon. Murder mystery. Solve the Sinclair Mansion murder. This quest is actually personalised, so you may need to take some fingerprints using flour and sticky tape, ask a poison seller who bought what, and do the local guards work for them. A soul's bane. Journey into this strange rift in the ground and fight through the tortured psychological nightmare of a young boy who got lost here many years ago, featuring some of my favourite enemies, the Confusion Beast, in this strange Alice in Wonderland-style arena with twisted doorways which disappear as you kill these odd flipping torsos with 4 legs, ending with a 3-headed warped version of the young child as a boss fight. Rag and Bone Man. Collect a load of bones from various creatures, and by now I think we've shown that RuneScape has variety. It's got scope, but what about depth? Both story-wise and mechanical. There are 2 ways to test that. Finish a super long quest line and take on a high-level boss. So instead of doing a load more short, fun, shallow quests, let's dive into a quest line, an actual fleshed-out adventure, and see how far we can get. Let's do the Elf questline. RuneScape 3 players will know this means Underground Pass, Morning's End, and Plague's End, some of the longest and most challenging quests in the game, so let's try. Now, the later quests in this series do require extremely high levels, and the experience from a quest will not always give you the levels needed to start the next, so when I do need to grind between sections, I'll break down what I had to do, but not focus too much on the how, otherwise we'd be here all day. And there's already a 74-hour-long Morrowind playthrough on the Replays channel. We need to save some time here. The Elf quest series is made up of 9 quests, starting with Plague City. The city of Ardoon, ruled over by King Lathus, is divided into 2 sections. East Ardoon is prosperous and fine, while West Ardoon is quarantined to contain the outbreak of a plague. The quarantine section is patrolled by the Mourners, people dressed in complete plague doctor outfits. They maintain law and order and administer what meagre medical care they can to the infected. In Eastern Ardoon, we meet Edmund. He says his daughter Elena went to the western section to try and help and study the plague, but she's not come back yet. He asks if we can go and look for her. But we cannot just walk in through the locked doors. The Mourners won't allow it, so we take a gas mask, making sure we don't get infected, grab a picture of Elena, and dig a hole in Edmund's garden which drops us into the sewer tunnels below, sneaking through them into the western part of the city. We show Elena's picture around and discover she is in a house to the south, but nobody is allowed in because the Mourners say it is a plague house. So we go and talk to Bravek, the local councillor and mayor. Not a Mourner himself, but he does have the authority to grant us access to various parts of the city. We cure his hangover and he gives us a note to let us inside the house. Inside we find Elena. She has been locked in the basement. Her investigations into the plague weren't appreciated by the Mourners, so we free her and return to her father. Next quest, Biohazard. Elena is convinced something more sinister is going on with the plague, but her equipment was taken when she was imprisoned, so we go and get it. However, since our break-in, the border security has been tightened and the sewers are now being watched. So instead, we release a load of pigeons around the watchtower and use the distraction this grants to climb over the wall. The classic quest design rears its convoluted head once more. We need to get into the Mourner headquarters. This is where the equipment likely is, but we're not allowed in. Only medical professionals are allowed in for medical emergencies. So we drop a rotten apple into this cauldron of stew, making it disgusting and in many ways poisonous. Then we wait a bit. We finally take a doctor's uniform from this makeshift hospital, and now dressed as a doctor, we say we are here to help with the sudden, inexplicable onset of food poisoning everyone seems to have. Once in, we find the equipment in a storage room and return it to Elena. She says her equipment must be faulty because, according to her, there is no plague. The samples she's taken are all clean, but we must double check. She wants us to go to Varrock and give the samples to her mentor, Gaidor, so he can test them too. However, the Varrock Guard are aware of the plague within Ardoon and would be suspicious if one person carrying all this scientific stuff tried to cross into the city. So we head over to Rimington, grab some chemicals from the chemist, and then solve a short puzzle by giving the correct chemical compound to the correct courier to deliver them to Varrock for us. If you give the wrong thing to the wrong guy, they either sell it, drink it, or lose it. When in Varrock, pick up a priest outfit from good old Thessalia as the city guard ask fewer questions of men of the cloth. Pass the gate check and meet up with the trio of couriers, grab all of the chemicals back and give them to Gaidor, Elena's mentor. He repeats the experiment and confirms there is no plague. We relay this to Eleanor and then confront the person responsible for quarantining the city, King Lathus himself. King Lathus reveals Ardoon was originally one city ruled by 2 kings, himself in the east and his brother King Tyrrus in the west. However, King Tyrrus went through a magical portal and journeyed to the far western lands, and while there was infested with the corruption of the Dark Lord. King Lathus quarantined the western half of the city to prevent the evil corruption returning to the city or spreading.
king, making up a fake plague so the population would support him. But then he asks us for a favour. Could we travel to the Western Lands, find his brother King Tyrus, and see if he can be saved from the Dark Lord's embrace? On to Quest 3, Underground Pass. How do we reach the Western Lands? Well, it just so happens a deep dark tunnel has been uncovered just outside West Ardoon, and at the end of that tunnel is rumoured to be the legendary Well of Voyage, the teleporter to the Western Lands. Unfortunately for us, the Mad Mage Iban has corrupted the portal and turned it into a portal to the Zamorakian Nightmare Plane, so we need to navigate the Underground Pass, kill Iban, and restore the well's magical properties. Now this quest, Underground Pass, is infamous in the RuneScape community for being rather unforgiving in both its length, its brutal traps, and its high agility requirement, making it consistently difficult. RuneScape isn't Dark Souls, but if it was, this would be the swamp level. Because I know how demanding this quest is going to be on agility checks, I take some time to train my agility, which means travelling to the Canifis swamp and jumping over this little bridge several times, because it is the one obstacle you cannot fail. The agility guide then says one of the best ways to train early experience is by completing the Wilderness Diary, so let's have a look at the Wilderness. To do player versus player content in RuneScape 3, head into the Wilderness, the bleak northern bit. You need to jump over this ditch to get in so you know you're going somewhere dangerous. While in the Wilderness, you'll see a Wilderness level. The deeper you go, the higher this gets. This shows the level range you can now be attacked by. So in level 20 Wilderness, someone 20 levels higher than you can attack you. I do most of the diary requirements quite easily. Activate the lodestone, enter the chaos tunnels, pull a switch several times for some reason, and then I spot the Hellfire Bow. Now, MMO design is complex, and many people have said they'd love a PvP game where there was a powerful weapon, but only one in the world at any time, and when you pick it up, everyone knows, and if you hunt down that person, you get it. And that's exactly what the Hellfire Bow is. Picking this up would broadcast to the server that I had it, and I'd be able to use it, so I try. But the game tells me I cannot take it, I'm not opted into PvP. This is the Wilderness. What do you mean opt into PvP? In 2022, a Wilderness update changed the always-on PvP status to an opt-in choice. You can disable or enable PvP by talking to the NPC Vala by the Wilderness Wall in Edgeville. With PvP turned off, you cannot interact with some Wilderness events like warbands, use the Hellfire Bow or the Demonic Skull item. PvP is actually turned off by default, meaning new players will experience the Wilderness as just another bit of the game. The Wilderness used to be a place of infamy, but anything built around unbalanced PvP will slowly lose appeal to anyone not winning. Jagex have tried to revive the Wilderness multiple times over the years, putting skilling bosses, good loot, even quests or treasure trails in there, but very few players were enticed enough to risk being killed by another player. So in 2022, the decision to make PvP opt-in has definitely removed the feeling of danger, but may have made it far more accessible to the average player, especially with the amount of content there actually is in it. As for whether making the Wilderness effectively safe was a good idea, I don't know. While old-school RuneScape still has a rather active PvP community, with PvP content on YouTube and Twitch, PvP in RuneScape 3 is pretty dead. An opt-in Wilderness removed random ganking, and even with the ability to duel someone for fun anywhere, high burst damage being popular makes duels very, very short, and now Necromancy making it even more intense, it's just not a game focused on PvP. So I complete the Wilderness Achievement Diary and get an experience lamp as a reward. I travel to the new landmass of Anachronia, the dinosaur-infested land out of time. I build the start of a basic base and then run the wall agility course there for many, many hours. Then I realise the irony of training agility while sat down, so I jump on my actual treadmill and play RuneScape on mobile. The RuneScape 3 mobile client is pretty decent. Out of all the MMOs with mobile clients, it's definitely one of the better ones. While you won't be doing any complex equipment multi-swap bossing, it's great for AFK skilling like mining or low-risk training like agility. I even made a video on the RuneScape mobile client when it very first came out, and since then Jagex have made several noticeable improvements to it. It's quite good. After several hours of training agility to get the levels needed to continue the questline, I realised something which changed my view of RuneScape for better and for worse, and it's probably the most important thing I've come to understand about this game. Let's go through the Underground Pass quest first, then I'll explain what I realised. The The wiki recommends 43 prayer minimum for this quest to get protect from melee, but nah, we don't need that. We just need a few shark and a can-do attitude. As we're now on the official task from the king, we can just walk straight through West Ardoon freely, and at the end of the path we find the tunnel to the underground pass itself. It begins with a poison swamp section, then sliding down some rocks, making a fire arrow by wrapping an arrow in cloth and setting it alight to shoot and snap a bridge support on the other side, but you can miss. So this is a multi-step setup that you can just fail. That's peak classic RuneScape quest design. Use a plank on some floor traps, then attempt a rope swing and fail, dropping us into a more complex series of caves below, and now we need to climb over some rocks. But which rocks? You don't know. They all look the same. Just randomly click until one of them can be interacted with. Further in, we meet a guide. He says he can hear the whispers of Ivan the Mad, and then we cross this 5x5 grid of squares by just guessing which one is correct, and remembering the route, because you'll need it again later. Pass a load more traps, and then a bug where I can't seem to move after crossing a plank trap. I think this is linked to the shoes I'm wearing, so I report this to Jagex and they do take a look. Collect 4 orbs of light from around the cave and then throw them all into a furnace to open another path, fight through some zombies, and then one of the strangest moments in the game. There is a unicorn in a cage, and to pass this we must climb a ramp and then use a loose railing to lever a boulder to crash through the cage into the wall beyond, killing the unicorn as it goes. We meet 3 travelling paladins deeper in. They offer me some food, but they also have medals I need for a puzzle later, so I need to kill them, and by now I'm questioning, am I the bad guy here? Enter this absolutely massive open cavern. Crossing thin stones and wooden paths snake through the air above, and a deadly cavern lies below. The whole section is about finding out our guide has been driven mad by the magical presence of Ivan's spirit, and then finding a bastion of surviving dwarves down below, bringing them some supplies so they help me navigate the cavern, finding a witch's cat, then sneaking into her hut, all in pursuit of 3 magical parts of Ivan the Mad's very essence: his body, his soul, and his spirit. The Book of Ivan details the story behind this. It's basically doing a reversal of the immortality spell he cast on himself many years ago. So we set fire to Ivan's original tomb, rub his ashes onto a magical doll, kill a spider to obtain some of his blood, find his soul trapped in a cage, then finally kill a monk of Zamorak to steal his robes, and while dressed as a monk, break into the central room. Avoid all the magical pillars of flame Ivan keeps casting, and then kill him by throwing the magical doll version of him into the transportation well, effectively sending him to hell. Doing this teleports us outside, and we let the king know the passage is safe, the well of voyage is now open again. The next quest is Regicide, and it actually starts randomly 5 to 35 minutes after finishing Underground Pass. A messenger will show up and give you a letter, which is a summons from the king, which actually makes this one of the few quests you can technically start without having the levels to finish. Now, Regicide needs me to go and train agility. A lot. I do some maths, and I actually realise if I want to complete this entire quest line, including Plague's End, I'd need about 200,000 agility experience, and at 22,000 per hour at the minimum at the Anachronia course, I'd now need to spend 9 straight hours on agility. I was really enjoying that questline. A Dark Lord, fake plague, evil mad wizards. I want to continue it. But to continue it, I need to train a skill that I'm not enjoying. I'm invested in the characters and the plot, but continuing it is gatekept behind several hundred hours of other stuff I'm not invested in. In fact, getting invested in a storyline in RuneScape is a bad idea, because you'll eventually reach a point where the most efficient way to advance it is to go and start another storyline and gain the fast experience from the early points of that, until you reach a blockade again, then start another and another. You can end up with 5 or 6 deep storylines running concurrently, unable to advance any of them before you go and do other things. This is a holdover from those quest lines all being written at the same time many years ago, designed to be experienced slowly, weekly or monthly. Players who were around at the time of release spent the weeks between releases grinding skills so they were ready when the quest did release. And this happens a lot. Strangely, the design of RuneScape 3 and the player experience of the game is best visualized with a several 100-year-old puzzle. These are the Borromean rings, one of my favourite visual tricks. It's 3 circles, none of which are linked together, but they are also impossible to separate in this configuration, because trying to remove one clashes with the other 2. Despite not being directly connected, They are inherently joined in this configuration. I see RuneScape as having three major gameplay elements: grinding skills, combat encounters, and questing. And these three elements of design link together just as the Borromean rings do. People say it's possible to play RuneScape as a pure skiller, effectively engaging with only the one ring of the puzzle, and it is, but just like trying to remove that ring from the puzzle, if you skill for long enough, you will discover your progress in skilling is suddenly held back unless your progress in combat and quest catches up. Like how Herblore, the skill, is locked behind a quest, or gathering crafting materials might take you to a place filled with enemies you need to fight. If you want to focus on just combat, you absolutely can, but eventually you'll discover certain weapons or armor are dropped by enemies which are accessed by high-level skills, or bosses are behind long quest chains, or a weapon has a skilling or quest requirement, so the combat ring is relatively constrained too. But questing is probably the most hemmed in of these rings, and is also the worst to get emotionally involved in, because the storyline is a reward for playing the game a lot, that's the point, but quests aren't just mechanical challenges, they are narrative, lore, personal connection to the world. Getting a player invested in a quest is kind of the point, and then the investment hits the wall of, right, now you're invested, go and spend tens, in some cases hundreds of hours, doing the other two rings of RuneScape before you can continue here. Just as you cannot remove one of the rings from the puzzle, you cannot remove one aspect of RuneScape from the other two. And the more I play, the more apparent this becomes. There is always something to do in RuneScape 3, but if you do a specific thing for too long, you'll hit a block, a soft cap, which can only be progressed by doing something else, something you might not be interested in doing. I'm really enjoying the Elven storyline, the fake plague, the underground pass, the lying king. It's an intriguing plotline. But I know the questline ends with Plague's End, which needs 75 agility. At 52 agility, I unlock the Wilderness course. I would need to run that course 1,640 times to reach level 75. The course takes 44 seconds, assuming no failures, which of course there would be. That's over 20 hours of nothing but running an agility course. And this is where I face a choice. I want to experience the Elven questline, but I've given myself 100 hours to play this game. Do I want to dedicate a solid 20 hours to just training agility? And that's just one level requirement. The quest also needs 75 construction, crafting, dungeoneering, herblore, mining, prayer, ranged, summoning, and woodcutting. It's a Grandmaster quest. That's far more than 100 hours worth of requirements overall. To get to the end of a quest line, you can start and get invested in relatively early. Now, I'm not saying this is the wrong way to make a game. RuneScape is one of the most successful MMORPGs of all time. They're clearly doing something right, but high-level, long-term players who have already gained the requirements sometimes forget how long those requirements take to get. Because they've gained them over many years and the quests were released slowly, they can play them as they were releasing. Long-term players sometimes don't realize how intimidating it is to tell a new player, hey, that quest that you're really enjoying the story of, the conclusion is locked behind several hundred hours of other grindy requirements. And once you notice this design, it slowly seeps into every aspect of the game. If you enjoy just zoning out and cutting down trees, there's a better axe you can get, but you'll need to do some other skills or some combat or some quests. If you enjoy killing enemies, then the Slayer skill is great, but they're locked behind quests. And if you enjoy questing, well, make sure you invest hundreds of hours into every skill, because every storyline you get into and want to finish is effectively a reward for being good at everything else. Now, mechanically linking things to other things is great, but this 100-hour review has really highlighted to me how many roadblocks you hit during your RuneScape journey, which can essentially only be bypassed by going the other way. Imagine the Borromean rings visual again. If you start pushing into questing, you can go this way for a few hours until you're required to switch rings and push into combat, which lasts until you're limited by skills and then back to questing. But now you can push a little bit further out. It's almost like a gameplay cycle, keeping the player bouncing from aspect to aspect. This means your adventure line in RuneScape, if you want to experience all the content, cannot be a bunch of straight lines going toward whatever you want to do at the time. Instead, it's more like a spiral, with each small advancement in one aspect unlocking more reach into the other two, constantly pushing into more content. This does, however, mean, as much as I want to finish the Elven quest line, it's impossible to do in only 100 hours. You just can't get those level requirements in that time. Finishing the previous quests in a storyline do not unlock the ability to continue the storyline. It makes the continued narrative a reward, not for itself, but for other unrelated mechanical grind. Simply put, in RuneScape 3, quest progress, even along a single narrative, isn't self-sustaining. I do some more side quests for the experience. The Making History quest explores the connection of this small outpost to the rest of the land, nice bit of world building, and the Treasure Hunter promo keeps popping back up, but I think it's time for a change of pace. So having done a load of gathering and skilling and started some quest lines, I suppose it's time to do some bossing. Let's see how RuneScape 3 handles bosses. The tile-based movement system and the 0.6 second tick-based input gameplay limits what bosses can really be. We're not talking Elden Ring levels of complexity and reactions needed, but the new combat system does bring enough variation: stuns, staggers, interrupts, casting bars, channeled abilities, bleeds, combos, tactical healing, backstepping or dodging out the way. In fact, if the evolution of combat back in the day released as it is now, it would have probably been received much better. However, I do still have a rather glaring problem with the combat system, and that is how the visual effects don't always match up with the mechanical effects, and this can make moment-to-moment gameplay feel clunky, sometimes downright unfair. Here's an example. Because RuneScape is divided into tiles, your character is only ever on one tile at a time, so when you click to move, you'll begin running. But the exact tile the game counts you on and the animation of where you are don't always match up. You can visually be here, but for the mechanical matters of the game, you are here. Your actual in-game location is called True Tile Position. You can even get add-ons for the RuneLite client of old-school RuneScape which show you your exact true tile position, making mechanically beating bosses much easier. And this is what matters when attacks against you are calculated. But the enemy attacks themselves can also fall victim to this. Enemy attacks have animations, but sometimes the damage calculation is done slightly before the animation plays, sometimes during and sometimes after, depending on the enemy. So when you see the enemy raise their weapon to do a big hit and you click to move, you might visually be out of the attack's range. Your character model may not be touched by the weapon, but the true tile position may still be on a dangerous tile and the calculation may happen then and you still take damage. Combine this with the 0.6 second tick gameplay system and even with lightning fast reflexes, you're still going to be moving, attacking, eating and equipment swapping within those tick boundaries, sometimes doing so against animations and true tile position which don't match up. Enemy hits may seem to miss you but actually hit, or they may seem to hit you and actually miss, because animations are not mapped to hitboxes. They are just played out while tile positioning and tick calculations happen. What this all combines to mean is RuneScape's combat system is more about planning ahead and reacting to mechanical timing windows, not the visuals of the game. But this compounds with the visual clutter of the game as a whole: the UI, the particle effects, the enemy health bar, the graphical flourishes. RuneScape's combat can be a visually overwhelming affair where important mechanical signals can get a bit lost. And I think this is another reason that streaming RuneScape 3 or boss kill videos on YouTube don't have mass appeal. It's visually overwhelming with mechanics happening in the background that don't match with what the viewer is seeing. Only advanced players will understand what's happening. Now, some people will think I'm being unfairly harsh to RuneScape's animation accuracy in relation to its combat. It is not an Elden Ring style game. It is a tile-based RPG. But while old-school RuneScape is much slower and more focused on you go, I go style combat, RuneScape 3 is trying to be a fast-paced action game with dodges, interrupts, stuns, disengages, timing, and accuracy. It wants all that stuff to matter, which means when RuneScape changed its combat style to this faster-paced design, it changed the design area that it was competing in. If it wants to be this type of game, it has to be judged against this type of game. The type of players RuneScape was now going for did want mechanics to match animations. It's very hard to tell a new player, yes, I know it looked like you avoided that attack, but you actually didn't because you aren't where you think you are. The more you play, the more you can find examples of this visual dissonance, so let's take on the first suggested boss, the giant mole. One thing I do really like about the bossing system is the list view and the way you can watch the attack animations of each boss, so you can learn the visuals and know when to switch prayers or what to dodge. We can access the giant mole by digging in the Falador Park and falling into the root system below, but you can choose to try a boss in practice mode. The boss is just as tough and you get no rewards for killing it, but if you die, you don't lose anything, meaning you can train until you feel comfortable actually risking your stuff for a potential drop. Now, some people dislike this, but RuneScape sometimes holds free death weekends, removing the death penalty, and those weekends see record numbers of people attempting hard bosses which they wouldn't attempt before, and saying how great it is to be able to do this. Players want to do content, and people don't mind dying. They just don't want to lose expensive items or progress. So this system makes bossing and learning bossing accessible to far more players. But I'm feeling confident, so I leave practice mode and go for a kill, and this is where the dissonance starts. Sometimes the mole's attack animations are telegraphing incoming damage, and I'm already taking it, and it feels cluttered. RuneScape 3's more advanced combat encounters need you to look through them like the code of the Matrix, filtering the pretty but sometimes jarring clutter and only focusing on mechanical aspects, counting ticks between hits, timing, eating and skill rotation, managing your adrenaline, and clicking to move or use movement skills to manipulate true tile position on a mechanical level, even if it doesn't look like that's what you're doing. I also realize I can cheese the fight by sending my Necromancy minion into the room while I just kind of hang back and then use the gained adrenaline to heal up. And I know this is not the way the game wants you to kill the mole, but it's working, so I'm considering it a win. And with the mole down and nothing useful dropped, we can try the second suggested boss, the Arch-Glacior. First off, getting to this boss is a bit of a pain, which is a shame because it's an amazing boss. We need to access the Centersten dig site to the east of Varrock, and that means joining the Archaeology Guild. Archaeology is a skill released back in 2020 and focuses on digging up ancient treasures found in dig sites all over the world and uncovering the secrets of Gillenor's bloody past. While doing this, you can follow some cool stories and find some useful weapons like the powerful Tier 90 Spear of Annihilation. Then you can access the passive relic system, which is another minigame style interface progressed through by finding relics and fixing the ancient monolith, and this gives rewards ranging from increased maximum health to equipment with experience boosts built in. It's a supportive skill overall. You join the guild by digging up some soil, sifting it, and restoring some basic ancient swords, and then watching a voiced cinematic which is just a static picture. Once in the guild, you can go into this giant door. Welcome to a massive underground city. Now, narratively, you're not meant to be here until you've completed a load of quests and become the world guardian. You can find the gods hanging out down here, and they'll talk to you about things you probably haven't done yet. But run through the corridor of smaller glacites and reach the Arch-Glacior boss staging area, where you can prep for the fight, and I genuinely love what they've done with this mechanically. I absolutely hate the fact that a new player accessing this throws them completely out of narrative flow, but the mechanics of this are great. The Arch-Glacior is an instanced boss fight taking place on this narrow walkway. It appears and then you fight, and that's kind of it. The only mechanic is sometimes these ice walls will encroach from either side. You just need to be standing between them and you'll be fine. Now that doesn't seem complex, because it isn't. But that's the beauty of this boss. It's designed to teach new players how to boss, because win or lose, you'll end up back in the staging area. And you'll see these 6 powerful mages holding back the power of the Arch-Glacior. Each of these NPCs is suppressing a boss mechanic, and you can talk to them to turn the mechanic back on, and then take on the boss again at your own pace. The ice walls are just one mechanic. You've also got the spawning glaciate minions, a flurry of combat styles rotating to your weakness, vertical pillars of moving ice chasing you around, the frozen core collapsing onto the arena where you need to destroy it to escape the charging blast, or the frost cannon which needs you to activate a defensive shield ability to tank the damage or die. And each of these can be toggled on or off, and only when you've beaten the boss with all mechanics active can you take on hard mode. This build your own difficulty boss lets players master one style of mechanic, from moving out of range, dodging attacks, dealing with minions, saving damage bursts, or activating defensive abilities before adding more. It's a beautiful way of adding mechanical progression, and it's an absolute travesty it's tied together with advancing the narrative beyond where you should be, because this could be a training area in Burthorpe and let new players see the type of gameplay that RuneScape 3 is capable of. But try as I might, at my level the Arch-Glacior still wrecks me, so I read some guides, and this highlights another issue. Almost all RuneScape 3 guides are written as if you are already maximum level or have a ton of cash, because most of the player base are high level. Low to mid-level guides are rare, and even guides for low to mid-level bosses suggest you use some of the best gear in the game. Personally, I feel there should be a law where a guide to killing any boss cannot suggest you use items from a higher level, more difficult boss. It seems to do the mechanics I want to do, I need to be a higher level, so it's time for a quest montage. Again. What's mine is yours. Updated version of Doric's quest. Help a dwarven smith revive their dying business while reconnecting to their distant son. Serves to tutorialize mining locations and has a family conflict minigame at the end. Does, however, highlight the aesthetic difference between simple medieval old RuneScape and the hyper-fantasy dwarven forge now inside Falador. Old stuff is simple and functional, while new stuff is chunky, over-designed, and looks out of place. I'm not saying it's bad, I'm just saying it doesn't match. Death of Chivalry replaces the classic Black Knight's Fortress quest in 2013 13, updating it to a 6th Age quest where we helped Saradomin by joining signature hero Owen to infiltrate the Black Knight's fortress. We disguise ourselves as a Black Knight or Kinshra, then sneak through the first section managing the suspicion meter at the top, answering questions in character, fighting some level-scaled enemies, then solving some tile-matching puzzles. This quest highlights two weaknesses of the game: the often-used narrative dump, where NPCs just tell you a load of stuff you're expected to care about without showing you, and the atrocious hitboxes, which are mapped to neither the model nor the tile and just kind of exist wherever the designer felt like putting them at the time. Sir Owen dies, Saradomin revives him, it's all very emotional. Tree Gnome Village. Gnomes are at war with the local dark soldiers, find some military intelligence. The king then says the evil soldiers came in the night and slaughtered the women and children, and goddamn RuneScape, that got dark fast. RuneScape is a varied game in mechanics and tone. One quest will be jolly, silly, quirky even. The next will be a brutal, chilling account of actual war crimes, and you're never sure which one you're going to get. Fight Arena. Save a woman's husband from a prisoner fight club by joining and winning the fight. This is also the first time an enemy refers to themselves as a Majarat, which we will come to know as an ancient race of powerful wizards which ruled the world many years ago and have an important role in the God Wars. Waterfall Quest. Famous for being one of the earliest, most accessible quests with massive combat experience rewards, the quest ties into the Elven storyline. It's all about finding Glariel's Pebble and accessing a secret tomb under the waterfall, and this is what I mean by old RuneScape quests exist within the world. You can run past all of the important parts of this quest in the overworld and never realise their significance. And the plaque has red writing with a black drop shadow on a grey tablet texture. Thank God they've got better at text and texture over time. While running to the next quest, I right-click on a cave and click Examine, and it says, I can feel warm air coming from this cave, which is odd because most descriptions say you can, not I can. RuneScape's writing switches from first to third person depending on the writer. But then we reach the Needle Skips quest, and this quest is important. I mean this honestly, the Needle Skips is, in my opinion, one of the greatest quests ever written, not just in an MMORPG, but in all of gaming. It is a painfully heartfelt and dangerously emotional window into the struggles of a single mother with a sick daughter and the extreme lengths she'll go to protect her, without ever understanding that each choice she is making, despite pleading love, is actually extremely selfish and damaging them both more. It uses an interesting mechanic inspired by the short game Her Story, where you must find key words around the house, either related to objects or emotions or situations. Then typing the words unlocks a memory about that word. You piece together the memories to find out what actually happened. It's voice acted to perfection and can be replayed after the fact. There's no combat, no reward, no areas unlocked. It's entirely about the journey, not the destination. But for those players willing to emotionally invest, The Needle Skips is a beautiful story, and I ended this quest genuinely sobbing. It is stunningly well presented.
We're closing in on the 70-hour mark, and I want to see what else I can get done. From a heartfelt story to honestly just a time sink, the New Foundations quest sees us rebuilding Fort Ferenthe, a destroyed outpost on the edge of the wilderness. We kill some zombies and then spend 75 real-life minutes hammering various hotspots around to rebuild some walls. This is meant to give you an early boost to construction, but my god, this is tedious. Thankfully, it's followed by the Gower quest, and this is a perfect example of RuneScape's emotional absurdism. The Needle Skips made me cry, New Foundations made me bored, but the Gower quest made me genuinely laugh. This is a joke quest paying homage to the original creators of RuneScape, the Gower brothers, who were NPCs south of Falador. They are magical cabbage wizards, and it seems the RuneScape game has broken, so we have to travel to the behind the scenes to fix it, where this NPC asks if we're here for a graphical rework or were killed in a quest. When we explain neither, we're actually a player character, they find it very unusual but let us enter behind the scenes, which is a massive party taking place in this endless looping corridor, with all the major NPCs hanging out and chatting together. We learn they're just actors playing roles and enjoying a break from being killed, or Guthix, who's an actual actor annoyed he's been typecast as Guthix. This whole section is a love letter to RuneScape and is full of in-jokes, like the quest needing us to find 3 objects because they didn't have time to program a 4th. They literally say that in the quest. The Chaos Elemental being called Steve, or both older models of Zanuck gossiping about the more recent model and how they don't like her. There's even the brilliant line where you ask an NPC to help you break into the bank and the NPC asks why. You can respond with, "Quest says I have to." You can visit the series of pipes which make up the Grand Exchange underneath, travel to the beta testing environment where you level up prototype skills like horse riding or sailing, which is literally walking around with a wooden boat on your hips, shouting bang while shooting cannonballs. Even the bank standing skill, a long-time community joke about standing at the bank. Overall, the Gower quest is an extremely self-aware and enjoyable parody of itself. Next up, missing presumed death. Some murdered monks seem to have their souls still trapped on their bodies. Death has gone missing, so we team up with the desert god of the underworld Icthlarin to investigate. And it must be said, Icthlarin is the goodest boy. We find a strange puzzle box with a talking face and meet Sliske, another Majorat and the new main villain. Sliske is after the ancient and powerful Stone of Jas, and this starts the 15-quest-long Sliske's Game questline. Basically, Sliske has, through a series of complicated events, gathered all of the gods together in Armadyll's citadel. As the World Guardian, we are welcome and respected enough to look around. So we sneak around, solve some puzzles, avoid some traps, kill some enemies who can only be harmed after being lured into light, and then put out some fires in the god meeting room while Sliske releases a dragonkin to kill us all. The plot hook is Sliske has the Stone of Jas and will give it to whichever god kills the most other gods, triggering another god war. It's an interesting plot, but again, you can't follow it until you've done hundreds of hours of other stuff. Nature Spirit, help an old guy in a swamp. Making history, play the hot cold game with a magical key to find hidden treasure, and then Call of the Ancestors, and this was the moment I think RuneScape's quest kind of jumped the shark, or more correctly, jumped the massive corpse of a dead fish god.
Call of the Ancestors is a standalone thing, not in any quest series, made using mostly pre-existing assets. A bottle quest, if you will, done to trial a new mechanic, similar to the voice acting in One Piercing Note or the word mechanic in The Needle Skips. But in Call of the Ancestors, you climb the dead god Tusker and use the world window to travel to the land of Mazcab, home of the Gobies, these strange-looking things. While here, we must help find a cure for some poisonous thing that's happening by going into a forest, then a temple, then switching between 3 Gobies, playing as them, each with a unique power to solve a room puzzle. One can jump, one can smash down walls, the other is very small, and you need to press a series of buttons to advance. It's definitely experimental, and it shows both the complex nature that RuneScape can achieve and the limitations that it's held back by, given that you need to click on the Gobi you want to use, and you can't always see them very well.
This ends with a tower defense style click on the ground game where you cast magic against waves of approaching enemies. If you're playing with lag, this is a nightmare, but just spam click and you'll be fine. You can see the bottle quest nature allows them to try something new, and RuneScape has a long history of trying new things and then forgetting them. One of my favourite old minigames, Mobilizing Armies, tried to turn RuneScape into a real-time strategy, and while it did kind of work, it didn't work well enough to be worth supporting. Save the Gobies, get back to Gillinor, off to the desert city of Menephos for the Jack of Spades quest. A masked thief is stealing stuff, so we chase them, recover the items, return them to their owners. Turns out the thief was Ozan, the signature hero. The quest tutorialized getting around Menephos. Sticking with the desert, we can do Icthlarin's Little Helper. This sees us being mind-controlled by an entity called the Devourer, and we actually relive the events of things that we were forced to do while we were mind-controlled, like hiding some relics in a pyramid. During the flashback sequence, you're treated to this lovely spinning edge graphic, and the sequel Contact has us fighting through a very dangerous pyramid maze and killing a giant scarab. Off to Rat Catchers, a quest which brings all of RuneScape players together, both old school and RuneScape 3, by being universally hated. No one likes rat catchers, and the day Jagex even consider making a Rat Catchers 2, I will personally walk to the Jagex offices and talk them out of it. In this quest, you turn your cat into a Pokemon and have it fight for you, starting by hunting rats in the sewer, then heading to this instanced house zone and doing the mandatory stealth bit to Metal Gear past the guards and hunt some more rats, all of which is RNG based, so it takes hours. Then you send your cat through a hole in a wall to kill the king rat, feeding it food so it doesn't die. We then head to Keldagrim, the mountain city of the dwarves, but the first time you go there, you will trigger a cutscene of a boat crashing into a statue, which triggers the Red Axe quest start. We then end with a Snake Charmer's flute and have to figure out an awkward minigame to play the flute and get all the rats in Port Sarim to drown. Terrible quest all round. A Tale of Two Cats sees us helping Bob, the Jagex cat. He has fallen in love with Neat, the desert cat, but she won't talk to him because his family might be poor, so we set off to uncover Bob's history. Turns out he's the reincarnation of Robert the Strong, a legendary hero who fought the Dragonkin, and now Neat will love him. Jungle Potion has us collecting 4 different herbs from 4 different parts of the Karamjan jungle, letting the water graphics really shine. Recruitment Drive has us joining the Temple Knights, a more elusive organization which works alongside the White Knights. You must pass a few puzzles to enter, including one fight against an opponent who screams, "No man can kill me!" And they are right, no man can, so go to the Makeover Mage, change to female, and now you can. Pass the quest, get a cool helmet. Meeting History is about using
using a magically enchanted key to hop from 3 different time periods within a small house: the first arrival of people to this land, the building of settlements, and then present day. We hunt down some ancient objects using the time-traveling properties, another bottle quest about history. There's even a joke where you can examine the portal that the first humans arrived through, and it says, "There's cake through here, apparently." Into the Abyss lets us access the runecrafting abyss for quick access to the rune altars. This does, however, going into the wilderness, so make sure PvP is off, which it is by standard. Wanted is about chasing the Black Knight's soulless Delgar around the world. Each time you catch him, he drops an item and teleports off to somewhere else. The item gives you a clue to his next location. And this is the only quest which automatically cycles through dialogue boxes instead of waiting for you, the player, to click something, and I'm glad they didn't keep doing this, because if you're a slow reader, this quest is hell to keep up with. Buyers and Sellers is a humorous thieves training quest in Lumbridge to introduce the player to the thieving skill. Gunnard's Ground replaced Romeo and Juliet back in 2010 and is all about composing an epic poem so a dwarf can woo a barbarian woman. Then we start Recipe for Disaster, an actually epic 10-part quest which sees the leaders of different factions frozen in time inside the Lumbridge Castle dining room, all under the spell of the evil Culniromancer. And you must find a magical special meal to revive each one. This quest can be started early, but finishing it requires a lot of prerequisites. We can do the first one by making a slop stew for the goblin generals. Fishing contest has us winning a golden statue, so a dwarf will be your friend, and despite being the first fishing-related quest, you must already be level 10 to start this quest. Remember, old quests were often rewards for already being good at a skill, while new quests are alternatives to actually training the skill. Think of old RuneScape as, you've played and gained levels, so here's a quest as a reward, where new is, here's a quest to play, as a reward, you'll gain levels. This lets us complete the dwarven part of Recipe for Disaster. I like how you need to cool down this red-hot rock cake, and you can either use a bucket of water on it or pick it up while wearing ice gloves. Mechanical variation! That's great! The Tower of Life quest has us fixing up a magical tower, solving a load of puzzles using some very awkward interfaces like clicking to move a pipe into place or rotating some tiles, and ending with us answering a homunculus's questions about life and magic and directing them to either a life of logic or magic. This unlocks the life creation minigame. You can put objects down here to spawn stuff and kill it for rare drops. The Natural History Museum in Varrock has a load of exhibits to study and then answer questions on to gain some hunter experience. Perils of Ice Mountain has us catching some baby ice fiends. Tales of the Moosepar is a very nice sliding puzzle involving setting rafts on fire and sending them down various stream currents to stack against an ice block and melt it, then using an enchant sapphire spell to melt the massive block and discover an ancient creature. I spend hours doing quests, and there's no doubt RuneScape 3 is the gold standard for variations within quests. Combat, travel, story mechanics, world building. Yes, the old style may clash with the new, but they all bring something worthwhile. Every quest is worth doing. Even rat catchers, just so you know what not to ever do again. But the barrier I'm hitting is I'm taking on higher level enemies, so I need to grind combat. Thankfully, RuneScape 3 is actually 2 very distinct games. The one you're meant to pay attention to, and the one you're not. The one you just leave running in the background with AFK training methods. So let's look at those. Whenever anyone asks about RuneScape training methods, they always ask, how AFK is it? And I believe many people have forgotten that AFK stands for away from keyboard. I've had people say, this method is completely AFK. You just need to click once every 10 seconds. That isn't AFK. Low engagement, low actions per minute, absolutely, but not totally away from the keyboard. However, many skills do have training methods you can click and leave. Combat is likely the most popular. A great example is the Bedabin Nomad Camp in the desert. Normally, enemies lose aggressive status against you if you stay somewhere too long, but not here. As long as you are wearing an item that is aligned to either Saradomin or Zamorak like a holy symbol, these desert nomads will spawn in and instantly be aggressive forever, until you are automatically logged out after 30 minutes of inactivity. So, arm up and just stand here. But then the paradox of efficiency strikes again. These guys drop bones, and if I were burying them, I'd be gaining prayer experience. But there's an item called the Bone Crusher from Dungeoneering which can bury them for free. So it's back to Daemonheim to grind for tokens, but I need a better bow, so it's back to fletching, and then it's hours upon hours of Dungeoneering just to save a tiny bit of time once I have the Bone Crusher. An extensive time in Daemonheim does, however, bring this moment, which is a perfect example of RuneScape's older roots and its newer designs being mixed together. This is the boss Sagittaire, a ranger. He has a few attacks. One is shooting a regular arrow, the other is a magical arrow. Now, the magical arrow shot uses a modern animation. You can see it's really smooth, but the regular arrow shot is much more jerky, fewer animation frames, and no smoothing. This one enemy uses both old and new design. Then he uses his arrow rain attack. This prevents the player from running for a bit, but notice it doesn't add the cannot run status status icon, because despite applying the cannot run debuff, this attack was created before applying debuffs was a standardized thing. The templating for status effects didn't exist yet. It is a perfect window into how RuneScape was pushing toward a more complex design, and now it's here. But going back and standardizing everything is just too large a task. More hours of dungeoneering, get the Bone Crusher, back to the bandits, few hours here, and now I need to upgrade my Necromancer armor again, which needs a higher Slayer level, so off to do some Slayer tasks. Kill some Shades in the Stronghold of Security, into the desert to take on some Jackals, kill some Mogres until they drop some Flippers, and then I need a higher mining and smithing level to get the reagents, which means several hours of mining and smithing. Take a break to do the Tourist Trap quest, rescuing Anna from the desert slave camp by stuffing her into a barrel and smuggling her out, learn how to make darts, and a few more hours of mining and smithing. The main reason people are happy to do these long grinds is because RuneScape doesn't invalidate your progress very often. Yes, items may come and go and power creep does happen, but gained levels are forever. If you played 5 years ago and hit 80 smithing, you still have 80 smithing, and that's still good. MMORPGs are long-term games, and RuneScape is one of the few which feels worth investing time into, knowing it will hold value pretty well as a gaming investment. More mining and smithing, hit the levels, need some necromancy reagents, so head back to the city of and spend a good few hours just grinding rituals to ensorcel all the things, complete the Rune Mythos quest to learn how to make necromantic runes, upgrade everything, and finally, with the new Necromancy Ghost Summon, head to the Abyss. The Ghost Summon has a life leech effect, so I gain health back from its damage. Combine this with the AoE lifesteal ability and my increased defenses, and I can actually just survive completely away from the keyboard at the Abyss until the enemies lose aggression. So I need to click once every 15 minutes, and then we just wait. I'm able to leave this running while I do other things, like writing this excessively long review, and eventually, after a few more hours down here, I can chat to Hans in Lumbridge and see that I've spent 4 days, 13 hours, and 46 minutes in the world since arriving. My 100 hours is up. And I've still not done everything. In fact, there are 2 more specific things I need to do. The first is a clue scroll, a treasure trail system, and I love these. Enemies will sometimes drop clue scrolls. These are multi-step treasure hunts taking you all over the world. They'll have you solving anagrams to find NPCs, finding coordinates on a map, recognizing areas, solving sliding puzzles. There's a whole range of things, and every time you dig, you'll get one step closer to a treasure chest, which can contain junk or some of the most expensive stuff in the game. There's even the RuneScape creator Only Trails, who just follows treasure trails. I get a magic composite bow worth over 1 million coins, which I think is pretty cool until I remember in RuneScape 3 that is worth a whole 5 pence. And finally, with all these levels, I can head to the Archglacior and actually destroy him. I even turn on some more mechanics, pillars, core, flurry. I actually advance. And even though I still can't beat the guy with all mechanics active, I definitely feel the progression. So finally, after 100 hours, did RuneScape 3 actually get good?
I've been a RuneScape fan for years, so I'm aware of my bias. I've got friends who work at Jagex, and I've worked with them in a professional capacity on both versions of the game, Old School and RuneScape 3. But pushing all that aside, RuneScape 3 is something special. It's got moments of absolute genre-defining quality. The emotional writing, the self-referential humor, the emerging complexity of what they're able to do with the new combat system. Now they've actually fully got a grasp on what the evolution of combat allows them to do. There's a great game here, but it's inconsistent. The lack of templating for quest interactions, the years of different quest interfaces, the overwhelming general user interface means a new player is going on a rather eclectic journey, both visually and mechanically. Honestly, I don't think RuneScape 3 ever quite recovered from the damage done by the 1-2 punch of evolution of combat and the Squeal of Fortune cash shop. It's very much been overshadowed by the success of the old school version of itself. This leaves RuneScape 3 feeling like a game in search of an identity. It's not visually medieval anymore. It's not quite high fantasy or sci-fi or modern. It's all of them. It's a cosmetic shop and real-world references. It's aloof but also emotional and deep. It's a game full of abandoned ideas like minigames or signature heroes. And now it's just so big that bringing everything up to the same quality or even together visually, mechanically into one coherent thing is basically impossible. RuneScape 3 is an amalgamation of every decision Jagex have ever made, and not all those decisions shared any similar guiding principles. RuneScape 3 is a game searching for its own identity. It's pulling away from the foundations because it has grand ideas of its own, but it can't ever truly leave them because it's built too much upon them. It cannot forge a new identity for itself because it will always be RuneScape, even if it feels distinctly un-RuneScape in its new choices. The irony is Old School and RuneScape 3 share more than they don't. The difference is in how the player interacts with the games and how the games treat the player, the experience of playing itself. RuneScape 3 is RuneScape, but it's so changed it doesn't always feel like it. It's undoubtedly egregiously monetized with the weekly changing treasure hunter promos, mobile gacha style loot boxes, key sales pushing extra spending, intense FOMO and training dummies and death touch darts. And this does leave a sour taste, but if you can push past that, as difficult as that may be, there is so much to do here. You could spend 3 or 4 hours on a single skill before moving on to the next, and in 100 hours you would not have seen all the skills. I didn't even come close to unlocking the invention skill, which is fine because it's an elite skill to reward elite players. But I also didn't come close to unlocking the end of a quest line that I started, and that's a shame because I was invested in them. RuneScape 3's pacing has suffered from being added to over the years. The advantage other MMOs have using the massive expansion and propelling all of the players forward narratively at once is everyone can play the same adventure at the same pace. RuneScape 3's decision to keep the story relevant all the way through means that a new player is almost expected to still put years of work in before being rewarded with the game they're investing in now. RuneScape 3 has some of the best epic quest lines of any MMO, and they're all locked behind hundreds of hours of grind, meaning a casual player will never even see them. RuneScape 3 was good from the first hour I played and remained engaging for the next 100, despite occasionally soft-locking my progress in a direction I was enjoying until I went another way for a bit. And I also know that if I return, my progress will remain relevant, which is why they say you never quit RuneScape. You just take long breaks. It's got a lot of flaws, but that's because it's got a lot of everything, and any other game running as long as RuneScape is going to suffer some design creep or bad decisions eventually. But there is a reason it's still here, and I'm glad it's still here, because for every rat catchers, there is a The Needle Skips. And for every Black Knight Titan, there's an Arch Glacier. For every pest control, there's a hole on the beach. And those things are fun. Extremely fun. And you should play them. So thank you again to the team at Jagex for helping me with my Dungeoneering footage, and to my amazing Patreon supporters for allowing me to make this far too long video. You can support the channel from only £1 a month. Check the video description for links to the Patreon, Twitch, Twitter, and our Discord. And as always, have a great day.